Chapter 1, Uncle and Nephew 4 years apart. Trapped in the heart of endless darkness, inside translucent barriers pieced together by silver hexagons, I sat naked with my knees hugged to my chest, my eyes vacant and numb. I had no idea how long I'd been here, maybe a second, maybe a year, maybe 10 years, or possibly my entire life since birth. Who am I? Why am I here? The moment this question surfaced in my mind, something seemed to shatter. A crimson petal detached from my forehead, swaying as it floated upward and outward until it touched the silver barrier. In an instant, like vermilion ink dripping into clear water, crimson hues blossomed and spread, transforming the silvery barrier into a blood-red color in the blink of an eye. When I opened my eyes again, my first thought was how strange the room looked, simultaneously crude and sophisticated. I lay inside a transparent glass capsule, with several slender, clear tubes extending from an unknown white apparatus, connecting to my limbs and torso, delivering fluids of varying colors. The room was devoid of anything else, save for pale blue curtains tied back on either side of the window, through which sunlight slanted in, casting diamond-shaped light patterns on the beige walls. I yawned. The bed was so comfortable that I couldn't be bothered to think about where I was or why I was here. I just wanted to sleep a little longer. Right then, the faint sound of wheels rolling echoed, and the door seemed to swing open. I wondered to myself, who could it be? Mom, Dad, or that kid eating in? This place feels a bit like a hospital, so maybe a nurse or doctor. I raised my eyebrows slightly and closed my eyes again. The footsteps were steady, neither rushed nor slow, definitely not a woman's. As a kid, I often stayed up late in secret and was all too familiar with my dad's footsteps. This person certainly wasn't him. I secretly peeked through a narrow slit of my eyelids and saw a tall, straight figure in a white short-sleeved shirt standing by my bed. He was slightly bent over, attentively examining some equipment nearby. When I saw his profile, I realized it was indeed my younger brother, Eaming in. Beep. After the crisp electronic tone, even with my eyes closed, I could sense the glass cover above me slowly lifting open. My mind started racing. Should I scream loudly later? I wonder about this hospital soundproofing. Too loud might disturb other patients, but too soft wouldn't be any fun at all. Probably wouldn't scare that kid. Just as I was thinking that, I felt a pair of rough hands grabbing my waistband. I hesitated internally. Was this kid changing my clothes? Had I been unconscious for days, to the point where I needed a wardrobe change? And shouldn't it be my parents handling something like this? Since when did this brat become so attentive? Before I could dwell on it further, another second's delay would have my pants completely yanked off. I planted my hands on the bed and sat bolt upright, letting out a booming shout, "Hey!" The prank's effect far exceeded my expectations. Ah! Yen Yiming's body convulsed as if electrocuted, letting out a near scream before flailing his arms wildly. He staggered back several steps before crashing heavily onto the floor. I hadn't expected him to be scared this badly. Forget laughing, I immediately asked with concern, "Are you okay?" But he seemed completely petrified, sitting sprawled on the floor with wide, unblinking eyes and gaping mouth, showing no reaction to my question. "Yen Yiming?" I waved my hand and softly called out to him. I felt strangely nervous myself, afraid I might startle him too severely. At this moment, it dawned on me. I smacked my lips and cursed with a laugh. "Quit the act. I know you're doing this on purpose, trying to scare me back." But even after I exposed him, he maintained that pose, the look of shock on his face unchanged in the slightest. This eerie scene made me realize something was amiss. "You bastard." Before I could finish my sentence, a soft feminine mechanical voice interrupted. "Full body scan complete. Patient has fully regained consciousness with no hidden complications. Shall we deactivate life support systems?" Life support system? This big glass cover and all these tubes attached to me? I blinked and tentatively said, "Then turn it off." The moment the words left my mouth, within seconds, the ceiling suddenly split open revealing two dark fissures, from which descended two sleek, high-tech mechanical arms in pure white. Holy shit, what the hell is that? The overwhelming shock made me instinctively blurt out the national swear. One mechanical arm extended toward the white apparatus, tapped it a few times, and the valves at the ends of the transparent tubes closed, stopping the flow of those differently colored liquids. Another mechanical arm descended before me, its side splitting open to reveal a smaller ancillary manipulator. The primary appendage deftly removed each tube from my body while the secondary one applied a yellowish translucent gelatinous substance to the wounds. It felt cool and oddly pleasant. The entire process took less than 10 seconds. By the time the robotic arm retracted back into the ceiling, I questioned whether I was even awake. This was the kind of scene I'd only ever seen in Hollywood sci-fi movies. This hospital must be really expensive, right? When did Manhwa have such a high-end hospital? I hadn't heard of it before. I discreetly pinched my own thigh but misjudged the strength, wincing from the sharp pain with a hiss. Ow. Ouch. I followed the sound and saw Yen Yiming still sitting on the floor, one hand gripping his own thigh. I chuckled. "This shouldn't be your first time seeing this mechanical arm. Why are you still so shocked?" He didn't respond to me, just silently stood up. Watching his slightly disheveled appearance, I found it rather amusing and teased, "Yen Yiming, you're an adult already, can't you be a little braver? The young man frowned deeply, sighed after a long pause and said, I'm not Yen Yiming. You're not Yen Yiming? My eyes widened as I tilted my head slightly. After examining him carefully, I realized this young man before me, though bearing 70 or 80% resemblance to my younger brother, had a more upright posture, slightly sharper facial features, and more pronounced facial contours. If you're not Yen Yiming, then who are you? How do you look so much like him? The moment I asked this question, countless possibilities had already flashed through my mind. Is he some distant cousin I've never met? Or maybe an illegitimate child of Dad's second or third brother? Could he possibly be Dad's? I'm Yen Yiming's son, Yen Long. The young man adjusted his attire and looked at me with complicated emotions. Nice to meet you, uncle. The room instantly fell into terrifying silence. After what felt like ages, I swallowed hard and asked, how old are you? Yen Long pressed his lips together. 17. I slapped my thigh and laughed heartily. What a coincidence. I'm 4 years older than your dad, so that makes me exactly 4 years older than you too. Chapter 2, Yen Muyun. On the evening of June 28, 2022, the city's nightscape outside the window gradually drew closer as the plane smoothly touched down with a slight vibration from the seat beneath me. Rubbing my slightly numb ears, I stood up and retrieved my suitcase from the overhead compartment. Accompanied by the flight attendant's sweet announcement, I was swept along by the crowd toward the cabin door. I'm 21 this year, just returned from studying in the UK. Right now I only have a bachelor's degree, and next year I'll need to go back there for my master's, so I don't have that post-graduation anxiety like other college students. Following the signs on my ticket, I effortlessly located baggage carousel 5, grabbing both of my suitcases as they slowly circled on the conveyor belt. When I reached the airport arrivals hall, I stood on tiptoes and spotted my family waiting to greet me. My father noticed me almost simultaneously. This nearly 50-year-old man nearly jumped for joy, his normally stern square face beaming with smiles as he waved vigorously at me. Then my mother and younger brother also spotted me, quietly cheering as they came forward. I chuckled, pulling 2 suitcases behind me as I walked toward them. Bro, my brother reached me first, casually taking one of the suitcases. Though we're 4 years apart, before I left for college this kid was still half a head shorter than me, now he's slightly taller. Despite being brothers by blood, our appearances and personalities differ quite a bit. I'm naturally even-tempered and generous, started working out in high school, born with a broad frame, so even sporadic half-hearted workouts leave me looking fairly sturdy. I'm the type where if I accidentally rear-end someone on the road, the other driver hesitates to bring up compensation first. My younger brother Yen Yiming is 17 this year and about to start college. He's very outgoing with his friends and often the center of attention in social circles, but becomes quite reserved around strangers or elders. Compared to me, he's tall and slender, a rather shy boy next door type. Bro, have you gained weight again? Yen Yiming chuckled at me. I pursed my lips helplessly. Can't help it. Been skipping the gym lately to grind through my thesis. With my metabolism, gaining weight comes easy while losing it feels like scaling the heavens. Just eating 3 regular meals a day can pile on 5 or 6 pounds within 2 weeks. Don't bother with the gym. The beach near our place is perfect for running. Just go for a jog every day and you'll lose that weight. My mom Li Hui rambled on, reaching out to take another box from my hands. Mom was a simple middle-aged woman average height, neither fat nor thin, wearing no makeup, with her naturally wavy hair tied into a simple ponytail. Her vibe was very approachable. I dodged slightly to the side and smiled. Mom, I can carry this one myself. Dad came up behind me and tugged at the strap of my backpack. Give this to me. I didn't refuse this time and obediently let him take the backpack off me. The lively family of 4 walked out of the airport terminal and into the parking lot outside. Mom pressed the car key, and the pale golden Beijing Hyundai at the front left flashed its headlights twice, emitting a soft click as the locks disengaged. This car had been with us for 5 or 6 years, sporting a Xiang license plate because it was originally purchased in Hunan. Throughout these years, Dad, Yen Guochang, changed jobs twice, moving from being a department head at an international high school to vice principal at another, and finally becoming the principal of a third. The car followed us from Hunan to Shanghai and eventually to Manhwa. In this city where Min license plates dominate the streets, this car with its Xiang plate seemed a little lonely. Dad was always too busy with work to learn how to drive, and Yen Yiming had just come of age without getting the chance yet. That left only Mom and me as the drivers in the family. Mom was worried that I might be tired from the journey, so naturally she didn't let me drive, and I happily settled into the back seat. On the way home, the family chatted a lot, mostly about me, things like whether I'd found a girlfriend or if I'd encountered any interesting experiences abroad. These were the things my parents cared about, but my younger brother and I were more concerned with other matters. You must have heard about it too, I said, pulling my gaze away from the car window and turning to look at my brother beside me. Yen Yiming raised an eyebrow and asked, Big brother, are you talking about that virus that's been spreading overseas lately? Mom, who was driving, looked puzzled and asked, what's wrong again? This virus is different from all the previous ones. Yen Yiming began to explain but was cut off by Dad. What's so different about a virus? As long as it threatens human lives, it should be eradicated, Dad said firmly. I smiled slightly and continued for my brother. Although this virus does have a certain mortality rate, there are rumors that survivors gain some kind of superpower. Superpower? Dad turned to look at me. I swiped my phone and effortlessly opened a foreign website, handing it to him as I explained, our country has strict controls, so such incidents are rarely reported. But certain foreign websites have been spreading this for 2 or 3 days. According to statistics, there are already over 1,200 special patients worldwide. My dad is the principal of an international high school and usually keeps up with foreign news, but he hadn't heard much about this. He took the phone and glanced at it, noticing it was an obscure website. The homepage featured several highly viewed videos with eye-catching thumbnails. There was a blonde guy igniting a haystack with flames from his fingers, an Indian man with half his head transformed into silver liquid while the other half remained normal, and the most exaggerated one showed a girl whose mouth stretched open to half the size of her body, as if she were about to swallow the red compact car in front of her. While Dad browsed the page, I explained, according to the information on this site, this virus is currently being called SUP-001 by foreign youth. Those infected experience severe fever, with body temperatures often exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. And if the patient can survive, it seems they gain superpowers. Over 40 degrees? How could any normal person withstand that? Mom couldn't help but exclaim. Dad, who had been frowning while skimming through the website, finally handed my phone back and curled his lip. Who knows where these small websites pop up from? Zero credibility. Those videos were probably just concocted by some troublemakers. I shrugged without arguing. You've got a point there. I don't really buy it either. Maybe it's just that the footage looks too realistic, with no signs of editing, which is why it's gone viral overseas. I consider myself a materialist who normally pays little attention to supernatural phenomena. The only reason I knew about this SUP-001 virus was because a college classmate had shared the link in our WeChat group a couple days ago, introducing me to this obscure site. At this thought, I suddenly remembered something and turned to ask my younger brother, how did you know about this? Internet censorship is strict domestically, so theoretically, an ordinary high school student shouldn't have easy access to such information. Well, I'm going abroad to study this September, so I wanted to get a head start on learning about foreign affairs. Somehow, I stumbled upon this while searching. Yen Yiming grinned. The airport wasn't far from home, about a 20-minute drive. Soon, the car pulled into an underground garage beneath a residential complex. As I got out, I suddenly felt dizzy upon standing, losing my balance. Instinctively, I grabbed the car door to keep from falling back into my seat. What's wrong, DeBeo? Dad noticed my unusual state and asked with concern. I touched my forehead with the back of my hand. It felt slightly warm and forced a wry smile. I think I might be about to develop superpowers. Supported by my father and younger brother, I slowly lay down on the bed. My face was slightly flushed, my forehead burning hot, and my breathing somewhat labored. Dad fetched the forehead thermometer from under the living room TV stand and pointed it at my forehead. The screen displayed 38.3, clearly a fever, though fortunately not too severe for now. Mom hurried in from outside and placed a damp towel on my forehead, her expression worried. You were fine just after getting off the plane. How did you catch a cold so suddenly? I coughed dryly twice, my voice hoarse. Probably the air conditioning on the plane was turned up too high. Dad patted my younger brother's shoulder beside him. Hurry up and go buy some fever medicine for your brother from the pharmacy downstairs. Don't you need to go to the hospital? Mom was still worried. Lying in bed, I waved my hand weakly and smiled. No need, no need. Your son's physical condition is excellent. I've barely been sick these past 2 years. It's just a fever now. One good night's sleep and I'll be fine by tomorrow. Mom sighed but didn't insist further. Alright then, I'll make you some ginger and jujube tea. Drink it hot, cover yourself tightly, and try to sweat it out. I'll go buy medicine then. Yen Yiming, concerned about my condition and not wanting to delay, called out before hurrying to the door to put on his shoes. The Yin family lived on the 31st floor, making the stairway practically decorative in their home. Standing before the elevator doors waiting, Yen Yiming took out his phone to check the latest news. After a quick scan, he shook his head helplessly. Just as he had expected, there was still no information about superpowers. Though both my dad and I thought this was nonsense, Yen Yiming knew deep down that it was real. While lost in thought, he heard a soft ding, and the elevator doors in front of him slid open. A figure in a black hoodie stepped out, and Yen Yiming instinctively moved aside, brushing past them as he entered the elevator. Once the doors slowly closed, Yen Yiming suddenly felt something was off. He tapped open his phone screen to check the time. It was already 9 p.m. He recalled the young man in the hoodie just moments ago, someone around 20 years old with a somewhat gloomy demeanor. Yen Yiming couldn't place him. The guy probably didn't live on this floor. A friend visit at this late hour? The elevator doors slowly closed as the indicator lights began counting down, signaling its descent. I was wearing a black hoodie, turning around to pull it off and reveal a youthful yet ordinary face, my eyes staring blankly at the silvery elevator doors for a long while. After about 10 seconds or so, I withdrew my gaze and walked toward the door at the corner of the hallway. Inside the room, Yen Guocheng sat on the sofa with a troubled expression. His eldest son had just returned home and fallen ill with a fever, dampening the joy he had felt earlier. Suddenly, a knocking sound came from the door. Li Hui, who had just settled their son, walked out and asked in confusion, "Did Xiaoba forget his keys when he went out?" Yen Guocheng's mind was elsewhere, so he casually waved his hand, signaling his wife to answer the door. They lived in a high-end residential complex where security guards monitored every entrance, and access required key cards. It wouldn't be the first time Yan Yiming had forgotten his keys and come back knocking. Li Hui picked up the keys from the table and opened the door, muttering under her breath, You're so careless every day. Who are you?" Hearing his wife's startled cry, Yen Guocheng immediately stood up and strode toward the entrance. Li Hui reacted swiftly, realizing it wasn't Yan Yiming, and immediately tried to slam the door shut, but the intruder was too strong and forced his way in. The trespasser wore a black hoodie, his face unnaturally pale. He looked young, and there was something eerily familiar about his features to Yen Guocheng. With no time to dwell on where that familiarity came from, Yen Guocheng pointed at the intruder and bellowed, "Trespassing is illegal. Get out of my house." Li Hui rushed into the kitchen, pulled out a kitchen knife, and with trembling hands, pointed the blade at the intruder, screaming, "Get out! Get out now!" The young man's pale face showed no expression, his dull eyes fixed on Yen Guocheng as the corners of his lips curled into a sneer. "Principal Yen, fitting title indeed, what a commanding presence." Yen Guocheng widened his eyes slightly and finally realized why the familiarity struck him. "Zhang Yu, what are you doing here? What an honor that you still remember me," Zhang Yu replied, giving a slight bow. Though the young man was her husband's former student, Li Hui remained wary and continued pointing the knife at him. She found it abnormal for a student to visit their teacher unannounced at night without even a phone call. Normal people would have reached out first. The other party was a strong young man. While she and her husband were approaching 50, their youngest son had just gone out, and their eldest son was still bedridden with a fever. If the young man had ill intentions, the couple might not be able to handle him. The more Li Hui thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. She snapped, "Whether you're old Yan student or not, it's too late now. Our home isn't welcome." Before she could finish the word she heard a short, muffled explosion near her ear. Immediately after, the sound of shattering glass and objects crashing to the ground erupted behind her in endless succession. Li Hui, her husband, cried out in horror from nearby, staring at her in shock. Li Hui shook her head to clear the dizziness and turned around. Complete chaos had erupted behind her. The cabinet looked as if it had been struck hard by a baseball bat. Its glass doors shattered across the floor, scattering seasonings and cups on the tiled surface, many of them now smashed to pieces. She turned her head to stare at the young man, her eyes wide as if beholding a demon. Her lips trembled as she muttered a single syllable, you, but the words that followed wouldn't come, because she realized the cleaver in her hand was now broken in half, the jagged edges sharp and uneven as if snapped by inhuman strength. Zhang Yu extended his right hand, pressing a finger to his lips with a soft shoo. "Principal Yen, Auntie," he said calmly, "from now on, let's all remain quiet and talk calmly, okay?" From the living room outside came the sound of shattering glass, the muffled shouts of my father, and my mother's piercing screams. Half submerged in drowsiness, I struggled to prop myself up, wanting to call out and ask what was happening, but my throat burned too dry to make a sound. Exhausted from the journey, jet-lagged, and dizzy from the fever, my head throbbed unbearably while my entire body felt weak. Propping myself up on the edge of the bed with both hands, I forced myself to sit up, swayed unsteadily as I tried to stand, only for my legs to give way and send me collapsing back down. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the forehead thermometer from the nightstand and pointed it at my forehead. It read 39.5 degrees Celsius. In just 5 minutes, my temperature had skyrocketed to nearly 40 degrees. "God damn it," I gasped, as if on the verge of passing out, before consciousness plunged into darkness. In the living room, Yen Guocheng sat grim-faced on the sofa, Li Hui clinging tightly to his side, her gaze flickering between wariness and fear as she stared at Zhang Yu across from them. She couldn't understand why Zhang Yu had suddenly barged into their home, why the cabinet had collapsed out of nowhere, or how the kitchen knife had snapped in two. She even suspected Zhang Yu might be some sort of spy sent by a foreign nation, equipped with cutting-edge technological weapons. But her husband was just an ordinary school principal. How could he possibly be embroiled in something straight out of a movie plot? Zhang Yu slowly crossed his legs and leaned back casually on the sofa, his gaze icy as he stared at Yen Guocheng. "Principal Yen, you must know why I've come to see you this time, don't you?" Fear gripped Yen Guocheng's heart, though he didn't let it show on his face. He merely shook his head slightly. "Here's a hint, open your phone and search for recent major criminal cases in Changsha." Zhang Yu stood up, pushing himself off the sofa arms, and walked over to Yen Guocheng and Li Hui. "I'll be watching to make sure you don't call the police," he said, looking down at them with a cold, detached tone. Yen Guochang slowly took out his phone, opened the browser, and entered the keywords Zhang Yu had mentioned. The first search result was a police notice. In the early hours of May 21, 2022, a major homicide occurred in XX district, XX city, XX province. The suspect broke into a private residence and brutally murdered Zhang Moji, male, 47, his wife Sun Moli, female, 44, and their daughter Zhang Moyu, female, 21, an entire family of 3. The suspect is believed to be a young man in his 20s, approximately 178 centimeters tall with a slender build. Local police immediately launched a major case investigation, conducting rapid on-site examinations. Yen Guochang stopped reading further, lifting his head slightly. His previously resolute expression changed, his eyes widening as he stared intently at Zhang Yu. Is it Zhang Mingyu? %%. You killed Zhang Mingyu and his whole family? Li Hui was utterly terrified. She had no clue about these matters and could only tightly clutch her husband's sleeve, pressing her lips shut without making a sound, her body trembling slightly. Zhang Yu snatched the phone from Yen Guocheng's hand and tossed it into the corner of the living room, then walked back to his original seat and sat down, saying coldly, "Who else could it be?" As his words fell, Zhang Yu's eyes suddenly widened, his expression turning extremely ferocious and terrifying. "She and her goddamn parents ruined my life, ruined my family. I killed them all. Isn't that perfectly justified?" Yen Guocheng's thoughts drifted back to one afternoon in 2017. He had been about to go inspect classroom sessions when the bald-headed dean of students, looking terribly anxious, pulled him back into the office the moment he stepped out. "Principal Yen, something terrible has happened. That sophomore Zhang Yu took advantage of PE class to, well, do that to a female classmate." "What?" Yen Guocheng's voice instinctively rose before he caught himself and quickly lowered it to ask, "What exactly happened?" "I remember Zhang Yu, that boy shouldn't be capable of such a thing. Looks can be deceiving," the dean sighed. "I always thought he was a model student with both good character and grades. Who could have predicted today's incident?" The dean slapped his thigh with a pained expression. "Get to the point, what exactly happened?" Yen Guocheng frowned deeply. The dean quickly lowered his voice and explained, "That class had PE this afternoon. Zhang Yu said he injured his foot playing basketball yesterday, so he stayed in the classroom to study. A girl named Zhang Mingyu also remained in the classroom because she had her period today. Then, just 10 minutes ago, the neighboring class that was in session suddenly heard this girl's screams and the sound of objects being thrown. When students and teachers rushed over, they saw Zhang Mingyu cowering in a corner of the classroom, with Zhang Yu standing not far in front of her. I'm Yen Muyun. When I heard the dean report the potentially serious incident at school, I could hardly believe my ears. This is an expensive international high school where most parents sending their children are elite members of society. If something like this really happened at the school, the public outcry would be enormous. However, my years of experience and education quickly steadied me. I patted the dean's shoulder solemnly and said, this matter must be investigated thoroughly. We need to get to the bottom of it and provide answers to both families. At noon the next day, a middle-aged man in a suit knelt in my office, eyes bloodshot as he pleaded, Principal Yen, my Xiaoyu would never do such a thing. Please give us more time to investigate, don't expel him. I frowned deeply and tried to help him up, but he kept avoiding my hand, just repeating his plea for another chance. In the corner of the office, Zhang Yu stood alone, despondent, head bowed and shaggy hair covering his eyes. Later, Zhang Yu began telling his story. He said his father had come from the countryside, step by step bringing him and his mother to the city. He dreamed of traveling the world, yet by age 16, that wish still hadn't come true. However, his father gave him the opportunity to study abroad. Although his family's annual income was around 250,000 yuan, and studying abroad would cost at least 200,000 yuan per year by conservative estimates, he believed he could handle the expenses himself with scholarships, part-time jobs, and just 40,000 to 50,000 yuan from his parents each year. He asked me if his calculations were correct, and I nodded, saying they were about right. Then he asked if he was being overconfident about getting an international scholarship. I admitted he had the capability. After all, he had already earned a full scholarship from the school's parent corporation for his outstanding middle school exam results upon enrollment. At this international high school, tuition alone costs around 100,000 yuan per year for an average student. Zhang Yu said that was the happiest time of his life, but Zhang Mingyu targeted him because he pointed out his mistakes in class, and even talked behind his back, saying bad things about him and his parents. He couldn't hold back his anger and ended up yelling at her until she cried. The next day during PE class, he stayed in the classroom doing problems. Zhang Mingyu remained too, and he wanted to apologize, but she suddenly screamed that he was trying to rape her. Both Li Hui and I actually believed Zhang Mingyu. The very next day, Zhang Yu was expelled. When his parents' company found out about the incident, they fired them. On their way back to their hometown, the family got into a car accident, his dad died, his mom was paralyzed, and he couldn't even continue school, forced to work odd jobs instead. Zhang Yu was boiling with rage. With an angry roar, the LCD television mounted on the wall ahead shattered, sending shards of glass and fragments scattering in all directions. I quickly pulled Li Hui into my arms, shielding her with my back from the flying debris. Zhang Yu demanded to know what I was trying to accomplish. When I asked what he wanted instead, he told me to guess. Truth be told, when the incident originally happened, I wanted to conduct a thorough investigation. I sympathized with what that female student had gone through, and I couldn't bring myself to believe that Zhang Yu, who had both good character and academic excellence, was capable of such a thing. But that very afternoon, the head of the group called. He said Zhang Mingyu's mother was the chief editor of a newspaper while his father was the CEO of a major corporation. To minimize the impact, Zhang Yu had to be dismissed immediately. He even stated this outcome was what the group had painstakingly fought for, at great expense of manpower and resources, going as far as to threaten me with my eldest son's college admission. I'm just an international department principal, ultimately just a senior employee of the corporation. Under pressure, I drafted and signed Zhang Yu's expulsion notice the very next day. I also know that nowadays many online users easily believe unfounded accusations based solely on a single fabricated story, like Zhu Jun, ZHTYY, and that freshman from Tsinghua University, they all suffered unjust disasters. Even when proven innocent in the end, the creators of these false rumors didn't face appropriate consequences. But at that time, I was truly helpless. Those rumormongers and perpetrators received no punishment whatsoever, only the victims suffered real harm. My father Yan Guocheng understood this all too well. He knew that without direct evidence from either side, if things escalated to the end, Zhang Yu might forever bear the stigma of being labeled a sex offender. A middle-aged man in a suit knelt before my father, begging him for more time, saying he believed his son wouldn't do such a thing. My father wrestled with it for a long time, but ultimately reason won over emotion, and he still handed over the expulsion notice. He did this to protect his job too. After all, the entire family's burden rested on his shoulders alone. If he fell, my brother, my mom, and even my grandparents would all suffer. My father didn't know the truth either, but deep down, he wanted to believe Zhang Yu was innocent. But if Zhang Mingyu's parents filed a police report or appealed, with no eyewitnesses or surveillance footage, having this on record would basically ruin Zhang Yu's life. Right now, the other parents were just demanding expulsion, not pressing further charges, letting them transfer schools and sever ties without further trouble. Zhang Yu asked my father, "Tell me, what exactly do you want to do?" Then, with a smirk, he added, "What do you think? Take a guess." Dad's face turned ashen, his fists clenched tightly, but he didn't answer. Zhang Yu didn't press further, his lips curling into a sinister grin. Lost in his own thoughts, he muttered, "I thought I'd live an ordinary life in this small town, never expecting fate to grant me power beyond ordinary men." He raised his right hand, gazing obsessively at his palm, and asked, "Do you know how Zhang Mingyu's family died?" My parents remained silent, recognizing Zhang Yu's twisted state of mind and fearing the wrong words might provoke him. Without waiting for a reply, Zhang Yu pointed at the shattered remains of the television on the floor and said, "They ended up just like this TV boom. Their flesh and blood splattered everywhere." He squinted his eyes, took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled and said, "Feels amazing." My parents were terrified by the scene he described, their bodies trembling. At that moment, the sound of the door opening came, and Zhang Yu abruptly turned his head. Seeing it was me, his expression grew complicated. "Yan Muyun." I leaned against the doorframe, my face flushed, my hair soaked with sweat and clinging to my forehead. My voice strained. I said, "You're Zhang Yu." The explosion in the living room had jolted me awake from my high fever, and after listening to Zhang Yu's account, I mustered all my strength to push the door open. My head was pounding as I barely grasped what was happening, but I didn't know what to do. I was just worried about my parents and wanted to come out to see. Mu-Lun. Mom wanted to come toward me, but Zhang Yu waved his hand and said coldly, "Take one more step and see what happens." Dad quickly grabbed Mom and pulled her back to the sofa. They were worried about me, but Zhang Yu was too dangerous. I asked weakly, What exactly happened?" Zhang Yu chuckled softly, evading the question. I didn't speak, just lightly mimed dribbling a basketball with my hand hanging in front of me. We used to get along well, often playing basketball together. He even called me Crown Prince, but we'd known each other for less than 6 months, so our bond wasn't that deep. I strained to survey the living room. The world was distorting. The sofa darkened, the flowers looked like splashes of blood, and the walls shimmered. My body swayed as though I might collapse, but someone caught me. Zhang Yu eyed me with furrowed brows, murmuring to himself, "Could you have been infected too?" Then he shoved me onto the sofa. His gaze flickered briefly as he looked at me before hardening again, silently blaming me for failing to stop my father and letting him get fired. Truth be told, this incident drove a wedge between my father and me. I begged him to reconsider, even smashing my hand against a door until my pinky finger fractured. Only as I matured did the rift between us gradually fade. Zhang Yu didn't know any of this, and even if he did, he probably wouldn't care. Turning to my father, he said coldly, "If you don't want to drag your wife and child into this, come with me." My father clenched his fists and demanded, "Promise me you won't harm them?" Zhang Yu nodded expressionlessly. I promise, they have nothing to do with this. Dad said, fine, I'll go out with you. Mom grabbed Dad's arm, tears glistening in her eyes as she shook her head incessantly. At that moment, I shouted, Dad, and leaped up from the sofa to grapple Zhang Yu from behind. I was in poor condition, the movement made my consciousness blur, but I still exerted all my strength to restrain him. Dad told me to let go. I barely managed to open my eyes and saw him standing in place instead of joining me to subdue Zhang Yu as I'd expected. He repeated, let go, Muyun. He had witnessed Zhang Yu's strength before and knew we were no match. He'd rather sacrifice himself. Zhang Yu smiled and said, your judgment is spot on. Then he easily broke free from my grasp. Dad said to Mom, as soon as we leave, call the police right away. He then pulled away from Mom's hand and walked forward with heavy steps. Mom tried to grab Dad's sleeve but missed, her hand falling limply by her side. If I weren't so terribly ill, she wouldn't have let Dad go out with Zhang Yu. Zhang Yu glanced at Mom without an ounce of sympathy and turned to walk out the door, Dad following silently behind. At that moment, I quietly stood up, grabbed the vase from the coffee table, stumbled forward, steadied myself with one hand on Dad's shoulder, and smashed the vase hard against the back of Zhang Yu's head with the other. Chapter 7 Silver Barrier. Bang! The vase shattered into pieces, sharp porcelain fragments piercing my palm as blood sprayed everywhere. The recoil sent me stumbling backward until I collapsed onto the coffee table. Meanwhile, Zhang Yu staggered from my blow, his body lurching forward before crashing onto the floor on his knees. He had only been on guard against my father. After confirming my dad posed no threat, he let his guard down completely. Never expecting that somebody burning with fever could move so fiercely, he was caught completely off guard by my sudden attack. Damn it! Zhang Yu felt a sharp pain at the back of his head, followed instantly by waves of intense vertigo. Blood trickled down his neck, dripping onto the pristine white tiles where it blossomed like plum blossoms. Whipping his head around, he saw my father swinging a solid wooden chair high above before slamming it down toward him with terrifying force. I gave you a chance. Zhang Yu roared, raising his right palm as an invisible wave surged forward. My father's breath hitched in an instant, an indescribable terror welling up as he instinctively raised the chair in his hands like a shield. With a sharp crack, wood fragments flew, the chair shattered instantly. My father's slightly portly frame was sent hurtling backward, slamming against the wall before collapsing onto the sofa. Honey, the crisis had unfolded too quickly. My mother only just reacted, shrieking as she threw herself toward my father. Zhang Yu clutched the back of his head with one hand, eyes bloodshot as he glared at me sprawled across the coffee table. I didn't want to kill him in front of you, he spat through gritted teeth. The violent surge of emotions briefly cleared my foggy mind. Staggering to my feet, I instinctively grabbed the fruit tray beside me. The neatly arranged fruits scattered across the floor as I clutched the porcelain plate with both hands, my face contorted in rage. Zhang Mingyu's family is responsible for what happened to you, I demanded through gritted teeth. What does any of this have to do with my father? ? How is this not your father's fault? If he had just given me a little more time back then, dug a bit deeper into the matter, maybe he could have proven my innocence. Zhang Yu roared, then I won't be expelled, my parents won't lose their jobs, my dad won't die, and my mom won't be paralyzed. Fuck your robber's logic. Why don't you say that if you hadn't provoked Zhang Mingyu in the first place, none of this would have happened? I hurled the porcelain plate in my hand with force, only for it to shatter into dust midair. Get lost. Zhang Yu violently waved his arm, sending out invisible ripples that sent my 180-pound body flying through the air like a ragdoll. This time, however, he held back slightly. I was tossed just 2 or 3 meters, landing right in front of my mother and father. Zhang Yu licked his lips, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Not an ounce of remorse, still making excuses for him. I've really seen your true colors now. Am I excusing you? Fuck you. You at #%. Rage, despair, helplessness, emotions like quicksand dragged me down, sending me into an uncontrollable frenzy. Zhang Yu wiped his face, smearing crimson blood across his ghastly pale features, making him appear even more cruel and sinister. I'm going to kill your father right in front of you and your mother, so you'll spend the rest of your life haunted by this memory. Fuck you. My eyes bulged as I roared with the last of my strength. Zhang Yu slowly extended his right hand, his voice icy. Goodbye, Principal Yen. An invisible ripple expanded, carrying a force fierce enough to shred steel straight toward its target. My mother screamed hysterically, almost instinctively throwing herself over my father. No, stay away from me. My father, bruised and battered from the impact with the wall, knew the horror of what they were facing and pushed her away forcefully, trying to shield her from the unseen terror. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. When my parents regained their senses, they heard Zhang Yu's incredulous shout. How is this possible? Confused, they looked up to see me half sitting on the floor, with a faintly visible translucent white wall shimmering in the air before me. It was an indistinct barrier between reality and illusion, composed of palm-sized hexagonal tiles that gleamed silver-white under the room's light, exuding a futuristic vibe. You really have been infected, but your fever hasn't even broken yet. How can you already use abilities? Zhang Yu's voice trembled with desperation. I remained silent, because I didn't know the answer, and more importantly, because I was already pushing myself to the limit in every possible way just to stay conscious. The dizziness and pain from the high fever were constantly tormenting my nerves, my face flushed as red as blood. After a brief moment of panic, Zhang Yu regained his composure. Just some newly emerged supernatural ability, how could it possibly compare to mine that I've already mastered to perfection? He swung both hands simultaneously, sending out two larger waves of invisible ripples that rapidly spread outward. In the blink of an eye, the sofa was torn apart, filling the air with cotton stuffing and shredded leather. The coffee table exploded into pieces, sending glass shards, ceramic fragments, and wood splinters flying across the living room. The white porcelain floor tiles cracked and were ripped up, exposing the gray concrete underneath. The entire living room was rendered unrecognizable. Yet that white illusory barrier seemed utterly unaffected, its surface shimmering with a faint silver glow as the three of us emerged completely unharmed. Call the police, hurry and call the police now, my dad snapped back to reality and urged. No phone. My mom was on the verge of tears. His phone lay shattered beyond repair on the coffee table, and hers was on the dining table, completely out of reach at the moment. At that moment, the sound of approaching police sirens came from the direction of the balcony. It's Sister Wang, it must be Sister Wang calling the police. My mother's voice rose with excitement. With such a commotion in our home, the neighbors must have sensed something was wrong and reported it. Damn it! Zhang Yu panicked. He had only gained his abilities a few days ago and never considered confronting the police head-on. At that moment, the sound of a key turning in the lock came from outside. Our hearts leaped into our throats just as we had begun to relax slightly. It was my younger brother Yan Yiming returning with the medicine. Xiaobao, run! Don't come in! My mother screamed hysterically. But it was too late, the door had already been pushed open slightly. Stand still. If you dare run, I'll turn you into minced meat, Zhang Yu sneered. Little bro. I coughed violently, causing the white barrier before me to tremble and become slightly more transparent. Come in, Zhang Yu said coldly to the person outside. But the very next instant, he suddenly felt the world turn upside down. To our horrified gaze behind the silver barrier, Zhang Yu's body abruptly soared into the air as if seized by a giant hand, slammed violently against the ceiling, then crashed back down onto the floor. He bounced like a pinball, rapidly ricocheting between the ceiling and the floor, blood splattering, bones snapping. After roughly 40-some collisions, Zhang Yu's bouncing finally ceased, lying on the floor like a dead dog, completely unconscious. The door swung open fully as Yan Yiming stepped in, his face pallid and lips devoid of color. In his hand hung a white plastic bag containing several boxes of medication. Yiming, when did you? My words trailed off as my eyes rolled back and I collapsed, unable to hold on any longer. And as I lost consciousness, that silver-white barrier dissipated into thin air. Chapter 8 30 Years. The sunlight grew brighter, filling the room with warmth. I rolled out of bed and walked to the window with my hands behind my back, greeted by a view of lush green grass. A bit further away stood several willow trees, and beyond them lay a mirror-clear lake. After a moment of silence, I turned around to speak but found no sign of the young man who had introduced himself as Yen Long. I'm stepping out to make a phone call, be right back. His hurried farewell echoed in the empty room before the door clicked shut. Left with this spare moment, I casually wandered about, inspecting every corner without feeling the slightest boredom. 5 minutes later, Yen Long returned with a complicated expression on his face, a mix of happiness and worry. With some apology in his voice, he said, "My dad is in a meeting right now, so he can't come over immediately." Hearing this, I suddenly burst into laughter and even started clapping. Alright, stop acting. Is this some kind of reality show? I just looked around but didn't find any cameras, you guys hid them pretty well. As I spoke, I walked over and patted him on the shoulder. Yen Long frowned slightly and sighed. This isn't some reality show, of course there aren't any cameras. My expression turned serious, unconsciously revealing my authority as an elder brother. Yen Yiming, don't think I won't recognize you just because you've whitened your makeup and changed your appearance a bit. Enough jokes. Where are mom and dad? They should be fine, right? Yen Long lowered his head, his voice heavy. Grandpa and grandma, they're already gone. I instantly became furious, my voice suddenly rising sharply. Yen Yiming, you've gone too far. I never imagined this brat would dare joke about our parents' lives. Yen Long didn't look at me, slowly turning around as his right palm lightly stroked the back of his left hand. Connect to room A045's AI, initiate environmental simulation function. I clenched my fists and growled in a low voice. Yen Yiming, I said enough. Jokes taken too far are truly disgusting. But as he uttered the words lakeside, I was instantly choked into silence as if someone had grabbed my throat. The previously empty room suddenly transformed with shifting light and shadows, blue-green ripples spreading and crisscrossing across the walls and ceiling, forming patches of light. A dizzy spell hit me, and when I regained my senses, I found myself standing on grassy ground with moist soil beneath my feet. Above me stretched a clear blue sky, and a slightly fishy breeze brushed against my cheeks while ripples shimmered across the lake nearby.
My mouth hung open, words failing me.
Looking around, the high-tech hospital bed had transformed into a small wooden cot with soft bedding.
Yanlong stepped forward to stand beside me. This is the best holographic simulation room in the sanatorium. It can simulate hundreds of different environments.
I crouched down to touch the grass blades, feeling their chilly, damp texture against my fingertips. But when I tried to pluck some, my fingers passed right through the leaves, grasping nothing at all. Yanlong said, "This room can only simulate scenes and sensations, the actual substance isn't real." As he spoke, he dipped his foot into the lake water, causing ripples to spread across the surface, yet when he withdrew it, not a single drop remained on his sneakers.
The water's very cold. You could even lie at the bottom of the lake, can't swim but you can breathe underwater. Stop, no more.
Turn it all off, I interrupted with a wave of my hand before walking over to sit on the small wooden bed. The holographic projection ended, and the room reverted to its original empty state. Yanlong stepped quietly to stand before the bed. I lifted my head to examine him anew. This 18-year-old youth was dressed simply, exuding a composure beyond his years, serious and earnest. I was almost certain he wasn't my younger brother Yan Yiming, for I felt no familiarity toward him.
"How long have I been asleep?" I asked.
"If I recall correctly, 30 years,
Yanlong replied, pursing his lips. Finally, I understood why my earlier prank had such an effect.
It wasn't that he was timid. After 30 years of deep sleep, suddenly sitting up would shock anyone, myself included. That he could regain his composure so quickly, remaining rational and calm, spoke volumes about his mental resilience. I chuckled bitterly and ran my fingers through my hair. If I really slept for 30 years, how come I'm still this lively?
Shouldn't my muscles and bones have deteriorated by now?
Yanlong nodded seriously. Logically, yes. But medical technology advanced over a decade ago. Life support systems can now sustain life while preserving bodily functions.
I suddenly asked, "Do you have a mirror?"
Yanlong replied, "You look very young, just a few years older than me at most.
I want to see for myself." Yanlong pressed a button on the bedside armrest, and a mirror extended from the wall. I asked, "So it's 2052 now, and I'm 52 years old?"
Studying my reflection carefully, apart from looking paler and thinner, there wasn't much difference from before.
Yanlong nodded. "It's 2052 now.
Theoretically, you should be 52 years old."
Theoretically speaking?
Theoretically speaking, because medical instruments show your bodily functions are actually frozen at age 22.
That's not scientifically possible, I said solemnly.
Yanlong replied calmly, "Ever since various supernatural abilities appeared 30 years ago, and later when the deities descended, the fundamental scientific principles of this world were basically shattered."
God?
Yes, the one and only, truly existing deity.
Stop, don't tell me these inexplicable things yet, my head hurts.
I raised my hand with a wry smile. After witnessing so much technology beyond comprehension, I still couldn't believe I'd slept for 30 years, let alone some god.
Truth be told, I didn't want to believe it. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "If you're not lying to me, then my parents really..."
Yanlong pressed his lips together. "They're my grandparents too." The implication was clear, he wouldn't joke about his elders' lives. I didn't ask further, just sat there dumbly, my back slightly hunched. Yanlong probably regretted it a little. He was too young, he should have let me accept the reality gradually. But due to his flustered annoyance after my prank, he rushed to prove his point, like a child throwing a tantrum. I suddenly looked up, forcing a strained smile. "Is there another possibility? That I traveled to a high-tech civilization world, like in those web novels?" Yanlong nodded thoughtfully. "That possibility does exist.
Ever since I can remember, you've been lying in bed. I don't know what happened before that. Has your father never told you about me?" I asked Yanlong.
He replied, "He's told me many times, especially about the incident that caused your coma, repeated it over and over. He said you became like this because you were protecting Grandpa and Grandma." I suddenly laughed and scratched my head. That version sounds rather heroic.
Getting severely injured while protecting family sounds like something the protagonist in a drama series would do.
Yanlong said with a composed expression, "When I was little, I used to admire you too, but later I started to dislike you a bit."
I was slightly taken aback and asked, "Why?"
Yanlong walked over and sat on the other side of the bed, saying, "Because back then, I thought that if you hadn't had that incident, my dad might have devoted more energy to our family. Instead of working every day, spending what little rest time he had each week coming to the sanatorium to check on you. Other kids could play games with their fathers, go to holographic simulation parks together, even travel together. And of the few moments I spent with my father, nearly 70% were in this sanatorium." I slightly opened my mouth, seemingly a bit stunned, but soon could only offer an apologetic smile. "I really must have caused you so much trouble, I'm sorry." Yanlong shook his head and said indifferently, "It's nothing, I've long stopped minding such things. What matters most is thankfully you didn't let him down and finally woke up." I asked curiously,
"Yan Yiming, What does your dad do for work? How could he be so busy? As the words left my mouth, a strange feeling welled up in my heart. If all this is true, then Yen Yiming would be my younger brother. But now, mentioning his name in front of Yen Long somehow feels inappropriate. It's like how we wouldn't address our classmates' parents by their first names, it just wouldn't be polite. Yen Long didn't seem to mind, replying calmly, he's currently the deputy director of the Special Operations Central Bureau in Manhwa City. Special Operations Central Bureau? I asked, puzzled. Its full name is the Central Bureau for Handling Special Affairs, a department established by the state 30 years ago. You can think of it as an agency dedicated to dealing with awakened criminals and supernatural incidents. Yen Long's tone was calm, as if stating something obvious. Since that inexplicable plague 30 years ago, over 10% of the global population has acquired various superhuman abilities. To maintain social order, the government naturally established relevant administrative departments immediately. Hearing this, I couldn't help but gulp, finally realizing that this world seemed not just more technologically advanced, but also contained elements beyond my understanding. Noticing my expression, Yen Long frowned slightly in apparent confusion. My father once mentioned that you also possessed extraordinary abilities, and your coma was actually caused by a criminal with awakened powers. I forced a bitter smile and scratched my head, unwilling to dwell on the topic, so I deliberately changed the subject. The deputy director must be pretty impressive, right? MN. Yen Long nodded, his expression unchanging. To put it simply, in the field of supernatural incidents, he's effectively the second in command in Manhwa City. A faint smile tugged at my lips. He's become so capable now. In my memories, my younger brother was still just a tall, thin boy with a shy grin. Hearing that he'd become such an important figure left me feeling strangely surreal, as if it couldn't possibly be real. I smiled and said, what about the benefits? I remember asking him before what he wanted to do in the future, but he could never give a clear answer. His only requirement was that the career must make money. Later, Dad mentioned that actuaries could earn $1 million a year, so he chose to apply for a mathematics program at Oxford University in the UK. But in the end, he didn't go abroad. Yen Long suddenly stood up, walked to the window, and with an air of maturity, clasped his hands behind his back. He chose to stay, was specially recruited into the People's Public Security University, and eventually joined the Special Operations Bureau. Why? I was taken aback, recalling how my younger brother had always dreamed of studying abroad. I never expected him to choose to become a police officer. He had never expressed any intention toward that path in my memory. Yen Long fell silent for a long moment before turning around, his dark eyes gazing calmly. Because of you, he said, and because of my grandparents. He said they only had one son left him. He couldn't bear to leave them. And most importantly, he wanted to rely on his own abilities to catch the superhuman who hurt you. My eyes grew slightly warm, my emotions surging. After a moment of silence, I asked softly, so, was that criminal eventually caught? Yen Long turned around again, his gaze fixed on the lawn outside the window. On the night you fell into a coma, Zhang Yu was initially caught by the police, but he still managed to escape in the end. Is it because of his special ability? I asked. Yes, there was a series of chain reaction car accidents that night. Fortunately, no one died, and most people only sustained minor injuries. I slightly furrowed my brows. Did he come back to cause trouble afterward? Yen Long thought for a moment before saying, after that incident, my grandparents moved away with my father. But later, a letter was mailed to my grandfather's school. It was an apology letter signed by Zhang Yu. I sighed. In that case, it's just as well. You're quite magnanimous. Yen Long turned his head, raising an eyebrow slightly. He's the one who caused you to fall into a coma for 30 years. For me, it was like just taking a nap, I said with a bitter smile. Yen Long folded his arms across his chest, but Grandpa, Grandma, and even my father never forgave him. By then, you'd already been in a coma for 2 years. In their hearts, the chance of you waking up was virtually zero. I pursed my lips and sighed. Sorry, I was being a bit selfish. For me, it was just one night's sleep, but for my parents in Yen Yiming, it was almost like losing a son, losing an older brother. The atmosphere in the room grew somewhat oppressive. Even the bright sunlight streaming through the window couldn't dispel this heavy feeling. Let's go. It's time for you to be discharged. Yen Long suddenly straightened up. After a quick shower, I changed into a black t-shirt and beige shorts. Pushing open the door, I found Yen Long already waiting for me not far away. I waved at him. Finished with the discharge procedures? Not much procedure. Just needed a family member's signature, Yen Long said calmly. Shall we go then? Move out. Yen Long took 2 steps, then suddenly stopped and half-turned to look at me. Did you really believe it just like that? What did you believe? I believe I've slept for 30 years. You're really something, I chuckled. When I didn't believe, you tried every way to make me believe. Now that I finally do, you don't believe that I truly believe. I just thought. I assumed you'd at least let me show pictures of my grandparents, or my dad. I didn't speak, just gave a slight smirk. Suddenly Yen Long understood. It wasn't that I hadn't thought of looking at the photos, but that I was unwilling to look, or perhaps afraid to see. Because when you truly see certain things, some cruel truths would be confirmed, leaving no room for reversal. Why look at photos when your face is enough? Anyone can tell you're from the Yen family at first glance. I laughed heartily twice and reached out to pat his shoulder. Yen Long didn't expose me, walking forward expressionlessly. The two of us arrived at the entrance of the sanatorium. We didn't encounter many staff members along the way, but nearly everyone spared me an extra glance. 30 years in a single sleep, I guess I'm a rare specimen now, I joked self-deprecatingly. Yen Long gestured to me, saying, I need to fetch something. He then walked over to a locker in the corner and pulled out a black suitcase. I glanced at it curiously and asked, what's inside that? Work supplies. You already have a job at 18? More like an internship. I'll be starting college after summer break ends. Making idle conversation, the two followed the white stone path across the lawn and circled around to the parking lot behind the sanatorium. Looking at the black motorcycle in front of me, I clicked my tongue. I thought the transportation would be more advanced, like spaceships or anti-gravity vehicles or something. I have to admit this motorcycle looks cool. Its matte black paint with gold red accents gives it a pretty domineering presence, but it lacks the sci-fi vibes I was most looking forward to. Those things you mentioned do exist, but they're very expensive. Yen Long took off the helmet from the handlebars and handed it to me, speaking casually, I didn't expect you to wake up today, so there's only one helmet. You wear this first. This recovery center is in the suburbs. I'll buy another one once we get to the city. I took the helmet handed to me by Yen Long, feeling somewhat puzzled, and asked, can't even a deputy bureau chief afford a car? Yen Long straddled the motorcycle, turned his head to look at me, and explained, my dad does have a government-issued amphibious car, but he won't let me drive it, worried it might look bad. Besides, do you think this sanatorium comes cheap? I was momentarily at a loss for words. Yen Long continued, this is the highest-grade sanatorium funded by the state, only open to family members of government officials. Though my father's position qualifies for some fee reductions, staying here for nearly 10 years still adds up to a significant expense. I didn't dare speak anymore. In silence, I swung my leg over the motorcycle seat and grabbed Yen Long's shoulders for support. Yen Long asked, ready? Wait, I said. Yen Long tilted his head slightly. I pointed at my nose through the motorcycle helmet and asked in a muffled voice, will I make the news? Waking up after 30 years of sleep, shouldn't that be huge news? Yen Long said, that shouldn't be the case. After all, this is government staff we're talking about, they definitely maintain some level of confidentiality. It's unlikely the media would easily get hold of your information. Oh, I nodded. Yen Long asked again, no more questions, right? I reminded him, you seem to have forgotten to insert the key. Yen Long explained, it doesn't need a key. The handle has biometric recognition, I just need to grip it to unlock and start the vehicle. Oh, no more questions? None. The black motorcycle emitted a low roar as it sped down the road, leaving the sanatorium behind. I called out, Yen Long? What? Why isn't there any wind? The bike was moving fast, yet when I stretched out a hand, I barely felt anything. Yen Long said, the windproof function comes from jet nozzles at the front of the motorcycle. They counteract oncoming airflow during travel, creating a wind barrier. Wow, that sounds really advanced. It's technology from over a decade ago. I didn't speak again for the rest of the journey. About 10 minutes later, a vast and magnificent steel jungle came into view. I quietly observed the distant scene, my heartbeat quickening slightly. I had seen this sight in sci-fi films, but when it appeared in reality before me, I felt a pure sense of awe along with a faint trace of fear. As we drew closer to the city, the number of vehicles on the road increased, most with designs I'd never seen before, ranging from sleek tech-inspired models to downright ugly ones. Occasionally, a dark shadow would streak across the sky, moving too fast for me to discern its shape. From this high vantage point, countless tiny black dots crawled along the highways, eventually disappearing into the endless gray-white maw of the steel giant. It's not quite what I imagined. I thought in this era, the city sky would be filled with all kinds of holographic ads, I said, my voice muffled through the motorcycle helmet as I looked up. The towering skyscrapers around me stood like giant pillars, occupying most of the sky, leaving only a narrow slit that made me feel somewhat suffocated. At that moment, deep down, I had to accept the fact that I truly had arrived in the world 30 years later. Yen Long said, there was indeed a time like that in the past. Later, because it affected the city's appearance and severely disrupted residents' lives and public transportation systems, the government outright banned it. As he spoke, he parked the motorcycle by the roadside. I took off the helmet and looked around with curiosity on my face, saying, I thought the clothing styles of this era would be a bit more unique and flamboyant. On the bustling streets, office workers clad in black suits carried briefcases. Urban women wore elegant makeup, fitted dresses, and delicate low heels. Some of the younger people wore slightly flamboyant outfits, vibrant and messy yet brimming with a peculiar beauty. Though most styles were unfamiliar to me, they still fell within what I could accept. After parking the motorcycle, Yanlong folded his arms across his chest and said impassively, "Ugly things remain ugly, beautiful things stay beautiful." The progression of eras may influence people's aesthetic sense, but it won't distort their standards of beauty. That's certainly true. I nodded in agreement. 30 years ago, back in 2022, many people online thought the Hong Kong fashion style from the 80s and 90s looked really good. Yanlong gave a non-committal nod, then walked over to a tall white rectangular prism standing by the roadside. I moved closer and asked, "What's this for?" "Buy a helmet." "Buy a helmet?" I felt like a country bumpkin entering the city, finding everything both novel and incomprehensible. I watched as Yanlong extended a hand and gently tapped on the white rectangular box. Instantly, the light patterns transformed, and a colorful interface suddenly filled the middle section of the screen. Yanlong asked, "You shopped online before, right?" He waved his hand slightly, and the interface on the screen flipped to the next page. The corner of my mouth twitched. I fell into a coma in 2022, not 2002. Yanlong selected a black motorcycle helmet on the interface and clicked to place the order. I joked, "How's it gonna be delivered? A delivery guy who can teleport? Or drone airdrop?" No sooner had the words left my mouth than the bottom of the white rectangular box suddenly split open on both sides, and a robotic arm extended out holding a motorcycle helmet. Yanlong reached out to take the helmet, and the mechanical arm retracted. The multicolored interface vanished as the white rectangular cuboid returned to its original plain and unassuming appearance. Yanlong put on the helmet and briefly explained, "3D printing. Simple things can be made directly with it." I swallowed hard. The melancholy brought by the unknown and unfamiliar had already been diluted by these novel things. Seeing how interested I looked, Yanlong added a few more details. This vending machine also has holographic simulation functions. For example, when you're buying clothes, you can use projections to try them on to confirm sizes and styles. I clicked my tongue. The name sounds a bit cheesy, lacking that high-tech vibe. Yanlong slightly raised an eyebrow. "So what do you think it should be called?" I stayed silent for a moment, then finally scratched the back of my head and chuckled sheepishly. "I can't think of any particularly fancy names either." Just then, I noticed Yanlong's posture suddenly stiffen, his movements becoming unnatural. I couldn't help but step forward and ask, "What's wrong?" Yanlong raised a finger to his lips, signaling me to be quiet. He removed the motorcycle helmet he'd just put on, his expression grave. Following his gaze, I looked behind the vending machine, but there was nothing behind that simple white rectangular box, nothing worth paying attention to at all. Wait, am I seeing this right? Is that shadow moving? The afternoon sun cast oblique rays, creating a patch of darkness in the narrow gap between the vending machine and the building wall. Normally, this wouldn't have caught anyone's attention, but as I focused intently on that spot, I noticed the edges of the shadow seemed to tremble slightly, like ripples spreading across water when a pebble is tossed in. Yanlong's pupils suddenly contracted as if he had confirmed something. Without the slightest hesitation, he raised his left hand beside his mouth and spoke urgently. 12. Initiate an emergency evacuation of the area and send my current location to the Xiamen Haizong District Special Operations Bureau immediately. Dark Shepherd? A dark priest? I stood frozen in place, utterly baffled. My usually level-headed nephew, how could he suddenly lose his mind and start spouting Chinibu nonsense in broad daylight like this? Yet the next moment, a piercing alarm blared across the city sky. The once bustling pedestrians on both sides of the road suddenly quickened their pace, with many breaking into panicked runs. The flow of traffic on the road seemed severed at the waist, abruptly leaving a massive gap. What the hell was happening? Clutching my motorcycle helmet, I instinctively wanted to follow the fleeing crowd, but after glancing back at Yanlong standing not far away, I hesitated, unable to move my feet. Yanlong turned and saw me still rooted to the spot. He hurried over and gave my shoulder a firm push. "Run. Don't stop until you're at least 500 meters away." Seeing his extremely anxious expression, I realized the gravity of the situation. Apart from when we first met, I'd never seen him this flustered before. I wasn't familiar with this world 30 years later anyway, so it was best to follow his instructions and not cause any unnecessary trouble. "Ah, right," I nodded hastily before immediately running toward the other end of the street. But I only managed 2 steps before stopping and shouting back, "Wait, nephew, what about you? Aren't you going to run too?" "Don't worry about me, just run," Yanlong shouted loudly while walking toward a parked motorcycle by the roadside. "This is my job." "Bullshit, it's your job. You're just a damn intern." I cupped my hands around my mouth and yelled as loudly as I could. I was genuinely panicked. From Yanlong's series of strange actions and the reactions of pedestrians and vehicles, I realized something dangerous was likely about to happen soon. "Listen to your uncle and get out of here." I bounced anxiously in place, itching to rush back and carry him away by force. "You're only 4 years older than me," Yanlong finally responded, deftly retrieving the black briefcase embedded in the motorcycle's rear seat. Bullshit, I'm 34 years older than you. Holy fuck. My final expletive echoed loudly. In my vision, the shadows behind the vending machine suddenly swelled and expanded, crimson flames bursting forth in all directions like shattered stars. Chapter 12, The Molten Demon. The tremendous shockwave instantly swept through the entire block. The vending machine shattered into pieces in an instant, the heavy black motorcycle in front of it was overturned, and Yanlong was sent flying through the air by the blast. Look out! Seeing that figure hurtling toward me, I instinctively stepped forward and opened my arms. With a dull thud, I was knocked straight to the ground, my forehead slamming hard against the pavement. Intense pain and dizziness instantly surged through my entire body. Fortunately, with me as a cushion, Yanlong was mostly unharmed. Clutching the black briefcase tightly in his arms, he staggered to his feet, gave me a complicated look, then positioned himself protectively in front of me. The spot where an automatic vending machine once stood was now a scene of devastation, with scorched black marks covering the walls and ground, gray smoke curling upward before dissipating midair. A colossal shadow nearly 3 meters tall stood there, turning its head as it surveyed this unfamiliar world. It was a crimson-skinned monstrosity, its skull crowned with 2 massive curved goat horns, its shoulders, neck, chest and abdomen covered in obsidian stone armor. Its disproportionately short legs pulsed with terrifying muscular definition, like some demon crawled straight from hell. The creature sported 4 arms along its sides, the upper 2 grotesquely thick and wrapped in the same black stone plating, each easily twice the girth of a grown man's thigh. The 2 below were slightly longer, their skin a fiery red, with flickers of flame faintly pulsing in their palms. The molten demon, but luckily it's still in its growth phase, Yanlong muttered under his breath. What kind of wrong momo is this? I steadied myself against the bleeding gash on my forehead, swaying as I rose to my feet, my expression utterly bewildered. When I finally got a clear look at that wrong momo not far away, I couldn't help but gasp in shock. Yanlong stopped speaking and swiftly opened the black briefcase in his hands before tossing it into the air. Under my stunned gaze, the black briefcase suddenly transformed midair, unfolding and morphing into an oval black hemisphere within just 2 seconds. As it descended, it completely encased Yanlong's upper body. Amidst a flurry of busy, low mechanical sounds, the black hemisphere abruptly collapsed inward, tightly molding itself to Yanlong's frame while simultaneously extending downward to envelop his legs as well. Masked rider? My jaw dropped as I felt a burning heat surge through my bloodstream, accompanied by a brief ringing in my ears. The young man in the white t-shirt who had been in front of me was gone. In his place stood a sleek, jet-black humanoid mech with a slender frame. Its smooth, powerful contours were accentuated by glowing blue seams at the joints, radiating sheer technological and mechanical brilliance. On the mech's dark metallic back, 2 large white characters were painted, 12. At that moment, the hulking behemoth of a creature seemed to sense something, tilting its head slightly as 4 pairs of deep crimson eyes locked onto our position. Run! Get inside the building first! Yanlong's voice, slightly distorted by mechanical processing, still carried unmistakable urgency. At that moment, I also realized that my nephew was indeed no ordinary person, so perhaps there was no need to worry about him anymore. I glanced around and noticed that a shop door not far away suddenly opened, and a hand stretched out, vigorously waving toward me. Without a second thought, I scrambled over frantically and ducked inside through that door. Hurry in, hurry in. Regular folks facing off against that thing is no joking matter. The owner of the hand was a middle-aged, bald man wearing an apron, who shut the door tightly the moment I entered. Uncle, why didn't you run with the others? I swallowed hard, casting a frightened glance out the window. What could I do, huh? Back in the day when the alarm sounded, we usually had 10 minutes to half an hour to evacuate. Who knew today's would be so quick? The bald uncle said with a distressed frown. You're from Hunan? How'd you know that, huh? On both sides of the road, crimson monsters and black-powered armor stood facing each other at a distance, neither side making the first move. The middle-aged man from Hunan patted my shoulder with the tone of someone who'd been through it all, but there's no need to worry too much, because although the monsters from the Dark Vale appeared quickly today, the Special Affairs Bureau's colleagues arrived just as fast. As long as they're here, this monster will be dealt with soon enough. I nodded briefly to humor him, then immediately focused all my attention outside. Yanlong slightly bent his body, adopting a combat stance. With the assistance of his helmet, his vision now outlined the grotesque monster across the street with faint blue lines, displaying physical numerical values for each part of its limbs and torso. Analyzing its bodily data, the creature was indeed in its growth phase, roughly at D-class monster level. Simultaneously, he could see the flow pathways of thermal energy beneath the creature's thick obsidian-like rocky armor. When that crimson glow gathered from the magma demon's abdomen to its head or down to its 2 lower arms, it signaled the creature was about to unleash high-temperature flames. This growing phase magma demon appeared extremely vigilant, remaining largely inactive, probably experiencing its first descent into this world. 3 minutes. I just need to hold out for about 3 minutes, and the senior agents from the Special Operations Division will arrive. Or, In these 3 minutes, just get it done.
Yanlong stared fixedly at the monstrous behemoth before him. With a flick of his wrist, 3 black and gold pattern coins were already pinched between his fingers. His armor had undergone subtle special modifications. The fingertips of his right hand remained exposed, devoid of any fiber or metal covering, allowing him to unleash his ability with ease. Go! Yanlong gave a sharp cry as the black gold coins flew from his palm, transforming into 3 black streaks that shot toward the head of the monstrous figure, tall as an elephant and clad in heavy armor.
Does that armor not come with any weapons? I gaped from inside the restaurant, perplexed by the scene unfolding before me.
The molten demon clearly didn't take those 3 measly coins seriously either, casually swinging its muscular right arm to swat them away.
Bang! Bang! Bang!
A tremendous muffled explosion erupted unexpectedly, sending the molten demon staggering backward with its right side violently impacted.
Its stubby legs retreated several steps, leaving behind a trail of smoldering, spark-spewing footprints on the asphalt.
Jet-black fragments of shattered rock clattered to the ground with heavy thuds. Those 3 coins had somehow cracked open what appeared to be an impenetrable stone carapace.
Yanlong didn't relax his assault.
Leaping forward instantly, his exosuit-assisted jump effortlessly carried him several meters into the air. As he soared, his right fingertips brushed against a specific module on his left arm's armor, where a small launch mechanism's aperture peeked through, revealing the glint of a partially loaded coin.
Activate capability. Extend arm. Take aim. Fire.
The next instant, a brief, muffled sonic boom sounded as an invisible shockwave of air expanded between Yanlong and the molten demon.
Crack! The curved horn atop the molten demon's head snapped in two. Chapter 13, The Intern.
My name is Yen Muyun, and I've been asleep for a full 30 years.
The moment I woke up, I had to deal with this mess.
That guy fighting the molten demon outside is Yanlong. His special ability is mass control. Within 5 seconds of touching an object, he can multiply or reduce its mass by several times.
However, the larger the object's original mass, the smaller the multiplication factor he can apply.
Using specially alloyed metal coins, he launches them at several times the speed of sound within a distance of less than 10 meters. Mid-flight, their mass suddenly increases nearly 1,000-fold, giving them armor-piercing level destructive force. This strike severed one of the molten demon's horns, but the creature reacted swiftly, tilting its head at the last second to avoid a fatal blow. Enraged, it stretched its neck and roared, all 4 of its crimson crystalline eyes fixed squarely on Yanlong's black-powered armor. Through his helmet-mounted tactical visor, Yanlong could trace the flow of thermal energy within the molten demon's body and saw it concentrating heat into the 2 arms beneath its armpits. He hastily leaped aside just as 2 fireballs the size of human heads came flying. One smashed into the building behind him, sending debris flying and shattering all the glass windows and doors. The other hit the ground beside him, the explosive force causing him to stumble upon landing and roll awkwardly once. Yanlong assessed that this molten demon might not be a first-time incursion. His combat experience was limited. He had just graduated from high school 3 months ago and completed Special Handling Bureau training the week before last, receiving his custom-powered armor. By regulations, he wasn't qualified for solo emergency missions. But this Dark Veil incident was detected too late. As the first responder and a member of the Bureau, he had no choice but to stand between the creature and civilians. This was also his first real battle. The molten demon roared and gathered flames again, advancing toward him. Yanlong struck first, flinging several black gold coins. However, the demon had learned it blocked with its armored arms. The coin struck with enough force to make it stagger back, cracks appearing in its rocky armor, but it retaliated by hurling 2 more fireballs. Yanlong initially wanted to dodge, but realized the attack wasn't aimed at him. The fireball was headed straight for a restaurant by the street not far away. Inside that restaurant, I was squatting shoulder to shoulder with an apron-wearing bald man, peeking out through the window with just half our heads visible. When the fireball came hurtling toward us, the man let out a shriek, shoved my shoulder, and I landed flat on my butt. The man didn't bother with me, scrambling back into the shop on all 4s. I stayed seated on the floor, watching the fireball grow larger by the second, cursing inwardly. Was I really about to die right after waking up? Boom! Boom! 2 deafening explosions tore through the air, followed by shockwaves, dust clouds, shattered glass, and a scorching wave of heat that engulfed the street. Yanlong stood frozen in place, his voice trapped in his throat, his mind completely blank. He never had much affection for me since childhood, but now he was filled with regret. After all, my grandparents had waited their whole lives, and my father had waited 30 years, just for me to wake up. Yanlong was momentarily dazed when the molten demon pounced, sending him flying into the jewelry store with a single punch. The damage report from his mech suit echoed in his helmet. Lying amid shattered glass shards, he watched 2 fireballs streak toward him, thinking that with the police-powered exosuit's protection, 2 hits probably wouldn't kill him, though he'd likely be bedridden for a long time. He curled up, intending to use the armored back of his mech to absorb the flame's impact. Then, I darted out,
spreading my arms in front of him. The fireballs exploded, but my ability, a barrier woven from silver-white hexagons, blocked the flames. The inferno dissipated, leaving behind only a few dying sparks. I stepped on the pile of gold and jewels, turning back with a shy smile. Almost forgot, I have powers too. Chapter 14 Wei Jun. I held my right hand straight out, bracing the silvery shield, while gesturing with my left toward Yanlong. Hurry, I'll tank up front, you finish it off with the coins. What? Yanlong was utterly bewildered. Haven't you played games before? I'm the tank, you're the DPS. I take the hits, you deal the damage. I raised an eyebrow, though honestly, I was freaking out inside. I could only hype myself up by treating this fight like a game. Yanlong had no time to humor me. He pointed ahead and shouted, it's trying to run. What? I turned around and saw the colossal lava demon, stubby legs and all, sprinting headlong down the street without so much as a backward glance. This monster had high enough intelligence to flee when it realized it couldn't win? I was completely baffled. Yanlong braced his hands on his knees, struggling to stand as he said, we need to chase it down quickly, we can't let it harm civilians. Before his words fully landed, a dark crimson blur streaked across their vision, followed by a deafening crash as something heavy slammed into the concrete. When Yanlong and I focused, we saw the fleeing magma demon sprawled on the ground not far away. Now it had not only lost a horn, but its thick right arm was grotesquely twisted, while the obsidian plating covering its torso had shattered extensively. Its chest cavity was sunken inward by nearly half a meter, clearly hanging on by a thread. Ha ha, nicely done, kid. A booming laugh approached from afar before a burly man in gray sweats plummeted from above, landing squarely on the already half-dead magma demon. The powerful impact sent shockwaves rippling out, kicking up dust from the ground and obscuring our vision. When the dust settled, the burly man stood with hands on hips, one foot already having crushed the molten demon's massive head into pulp, his white sneakers smeared with gray-green sludge. Wei Gu! Yanlong's eyes lit up. Damn, this monster just died like that? I swallowed hard, lowering my arm as the silver-white barrier before me dissipated into thin air. Turning my head, I asked, and this is? Wei Jun, captain of the 1st Squad at Haizong District Special Operations Bureau where I'm interning. Among all the C-Class Gene warriors I know, he's the strongest. Yanlong clearly admired this man before him, introducing him with utmost detail. Ha ha ha, no, you flatter me too much. Wei Jun strode forward with a hearty laugh, waving his hand dismissively. The man was tall and robust, broad-shouldered with a narrow waist, his face framed by a hint of bluish stubble. His gray tracksuit clung tightly to his bulging muscles, exuding an intimidating presence. As he approached, I secretly compared our heights. He towered over me by a full head. Considering I stand 182 centimeters tall, this burly man must have been at least 2 meters. Are you hurt? Wei Jun asked, hands in his pockets, tilting his chin slightly. No, but this power armor is going to be trouble for Uncle Zhang, Yanlong replied with a strained smile, raising his arms. The shattered arm plates dangled limply, exposing circuit boards that occasionally spat out sparks. By the way, why are you here? Shouldn't Team 2 be on duty today? My gym's nearby, so I came as soon as I heard the alarms. If we'd waited for Team 2 to arrive, this whole neighborhood would have been rubble by now. Wei Jun chuckled softly, then looked at me with keen interest and said, aren't you going to introduce this young lad here? I thought he performed quite brilliantly just now, seems like promising material. Him. Yanlong turned his head to glance at me, his expression growing complicated. Hello, my name is Yen Muyun, his uncle, 52 years old this year. I stretched out a hand with a simple, honest smile. Wei Jun wore a look of utter confusion as he instinctively shook my hand. Only after slipping his hand back into his pocket did he seem to fully grasp the situation, his expression turning serious as he said, 52 years old? His uncle? Bro, do you know who he is? You can't joke about this. I grinned, mimicking him by shoving my hands into my pockets. Wei Jun tilted his head slightly, casting an inquiring glance at Yanlong, only to see the usually aloof guy frowning deeply, remaining silent. Holy shit, seriously? He couldn't help but curse. Yanlong sighed, lowering his voice slightly. My dad has a vegetable brother who's been lying in the hospital for 30 years. It's not a secret, you all should know about this. TSK. I did know about this. Wei Jun felt a toothache coming on. Sleeping for 30 years and waking up just like that, still looking like a young man? Ha! At that moment, I seemed to notice something odd and pointed ahead. That monster over there looks like it's fading away. In the middle of the road, Molten Demon's shattered body dissolved into flecks of golden light, slowly dissipating into the air. Now I believe it, he really just woke up after 30 years of sleep. Wei Jun sighed. Yanlong took 2 steps forward and explained. For some unknown reason, these monsters quickly dissolve on their own once they're completely dead. The Special Affairs Bureau has tried every possible method over the years, but they couldn't preserve even a tiny bit of their body tissue. That's incredible? I blinked, then remarked with some emotion, come to think of it, when these monsters appear, there's no warning either, just a bang, and they pop up out of nowhere. No, there are warnings. Yanlong shook his head. Whenever you see writhing shadows somewhere,
monsters will appear in that location in about 20 to 30 minutes.
Dark Veil?
Yes, it's the dark veil I mentioned before. Yanlong nodded, then sighed. Now there are specialized optical instruments to detect dark veil, which can issue alerts immediately, but they're extremely expensive. Only a few large shopping malls or high-end residential areas can afford them. As for public streets, there's basically no way except relying on manual patrols and reports from the public. This time, the dark veil appeared in the corner between a vending machine and a building, hidden by shadows, which is why no one noticed it at first. Under normal circumstances, this magma demon would have been dealt with by the Special Affairs Bureau agents waiting in ambush the moment it appeared. As his words fell, a black hovercar appeared at the street corner not far away. Finally here, Wei Jun glanced over and stroked his chin. In my wide-eyed gaze like a country bumpkin visiting the city for the first time, the wheelless black car hovered steadily in midair before descending slowly. The car door opened, and 3 figures leaped out. 2 of them wore black combat suits, while the third was clad in black powered armor, just like Yanlong, with a white numeral 10 emblazoned on the back of the mechanized suit. The leader, a man in combat gear with a lean and fit build, stepped forward. His gaunt face bore a look of impatience as he said, "TCH, Wei Jun, since it's already resolved, lift the alert in this area promptly. Don't make this trip a waste of our time." Wei Jun chuckled, pointing at the messy street. "How could it be a wasted trip? I'm on leave today, the aftermath cleanup is all yours." The gaunt man leaned against the hovercar, directing the similarly black-clad young man behind him. "Call the city maintenance department and have them restore this block to its original state within an hour." At this moment, Wei Jun walked over to me, his thick black eyebrows slightly furrowed with a trace of suspicion in his voice. "Did you really sleep for 30 years?
"What year is it now?" I asked in return. 2052. I was born in the year 2000, no matter what.
Hiss, this really is quite unbelievable. Thank you for your trouble, Captain Sunday. Yanlong handed over the tattered black briefcase to the gaunt-faced man. Captain Sun casually tossed the box into the car and glanced at Yanlong, who was covered in dust and looking rather disheveled. Clicking his tongue in appreciation, he remarked, "Not bad, kid.
You managed to break off a horn from a Class D molten demon all by yourself?"
In the end, I got careless after all."
Yanlong shook his head. "If I hadn't stepped in at the last moment, he'd probably be lying in an ambulance right now. Is that friend of yours interested in the Special Operations Bureau?"
Team Leader's son tilted his chin toward me with keen interest.
"Since you ended up joining Team 1, we could have your friend join Team 2. We'll see.
His situation is a bit complicated right now." Yanlong gave me a complicated glance as I walked toward them.
"Alright, shall we get going?" I waved my hand.
All I wanted now was to see my younger brother as soon as possible, the last remaining blood relative in my world, Yen Yiming, to find out what exactly happened at home during all these years I was asleep.
"Alright," Yanlong nodded. "Wait."
Wei Jun, a tall and robust man, hurried over and asked, "This young brother hasn't registered yet, has he?"
"Register? Register for what? Has my ID expired?"
I looked utterly confused. Yanlong pursed his lips.
"No, actually yes, your ID must have expired, but the registration we're talking about is done at the Ability Management Bureau.
According to the law, all citizens who awaken supernatural abilities must immediately register at the nearest Special Operations Bureau. Those who conceal their abilities will face detention for 7 to 15 days, depending on the severity of the case," Wei Jun added.
"My oversight.
I'll take him to register now," Yanlong nodded. Just then, Captain Sun, who had been silent all this while, moved.
He patted the hovercar's hood and said, "I'll drive you there. You don't look fit to ride a motorcycle in your condition."
After finishing my workout with nothing else to do, Wei Jun lifted his chin and said, "Anyway, I'm done with my workout. I'll help you ride your motorcycle to the Special Affairs Bureau." Yanlong's arms were aching faintly, so he didn't refuse their kindness and nodded in agreement. Before boarding the hover car, I turned my head to glance at the small diner we had hidden in earlier. The bald Hunan uncle stood at the entrance of the shop, now completely destroyed by the explosion, muttering something with a woeful expression. Afterwards, Yanlong, Captain Sun, and I boarded the hover car, while the other 2 Special Affairs Bureau agents stayed behind to wrap up and restore order in the block.
Captain Sun voice navigated, destination, Paranormal Ability Management Bureau. The black hovercar slowly ascended until level with the 6th floor of adjacent buildings, then smoothly yet swiftly glided toward the city's depths. Nowadays AI driving technology is highly advanced. Though urban traffic volume has increased significantly compared to 30 years ago, accident rates have declined year after year. This was my first time riding in a flying car, and I found it quite novel. I leaned slightly to the side, gazing down with keen interest at the street scenes below, observing everything about the city. The atmosphere in the car was somewhat heavy. Captain Sun broke the ice asking, "Heard it's a Class D molten demon?" Yanlong nodded, "MHM. Captain Sun continued, "If I recall correctly, your ability was rated Class B during your employment evaluation. As long as you gain enough combat experience, monsters of this level won't be hard to deal with. I withdrew my gaze and curiously asked Captain Sun, what level is your special ability? Compared to the scenery outside, this slightly edgy topic intrigued me more. What man hasn't dreamed of being a hero? To my surprise, Captain Sun shook his head. I don't have special abilities. I paused briefly, remembering the term Yen Long had mentioned earlier, and asked, are you a genetically enhanced soldier? Captain Sun nodded. Right. Like Wei Jun, I'm a C-rank genetically enhanced soldier. I struggled to recall the web novels and game settings I'd encountered, then ventured a guess. Seeing as you're not wearing powered armor, I assume you don't need it. Could it be that after awakening supernatural abilities, the body undergoes genetic mutations that prevent becoming a genetic warrior? Is that why powered armor is necessary to compensate for physical weaknesses? Team Leader Sun's face showed puzzlement. He didn't understand why I'd bring up such basic questions, especially when getting them wrong. Yen Long, who knew the truth, turned to ask me, where did you get these ideas? I chuckled dryly twice before replying. I used to write web novels in college. My imagination's not bad. Yen Long withdrew his gaze and explained, I fight wearing mechanized armor precisely because I haven't yet become a genetic warrior, not because I'm incapable of becoming one. Each person can only receive one genetic serum injection. To maximize potential, most people train their bodies to peak condition before injection. Like Captain Sun and Brother Wei Jun, who are currently C grade with B grade ceilings, if I were to get injected now, my ceiling would barely reach D grade. Moreover, scientific research shows the optimal age for genetic serum injection is around 20 years old. I'm only 18, so there's no rush. Besides, as an intern at the Special Operations Bureau, I'm not even qualified to receive the injection yet. At this point in the conversation, Captain Sun noticed something odd and couldn't help asking Yen Long, Xiao Long, who exactly is this? Yen Long replied, you probably know my father had a comatose elder brother who's been asleep in the nursing home for 30 years. Hearing this, Captain Sun reacted just like Wei Jun had earlier, utterly shocked, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. He exclaimed, 30 years in a coma, and just woke up suddenly? I gave a bitter smile, scratched the back of my head, and sighed. 30 years passed in what felt like a single dream. Everything familiar changed beyond recognition. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't have been better not to wake up at all. At this moment, Yen Long looked over with an expressionless face, sending a shiver down my spine. I couldn't help but think this nephew of mine might not hesitate to pull my oxygen tube if his father passed away. I quickly forced a laugh to change the subject. So, could you tell me more about these monsters? I'm really curious. Yen Long replied, you can find this information online. I'll look up some professional popular science videos for you later. The explanations will be more detailed and accurate. Noticing my disappointed expression, he sighed and added, we still have about 3 or 4 minutes left, so I'll give you a brief overview. Yen Long began explaining, these monsters are collectively called mutants. Records show they first appeared 29 years ago, about a year after large numbers of human espers began emerging worldwide. According to global statistics, there are currently 10 types of mutants, each categorized into 5 growth stages: larvae, growth stage, mature body, elite, and king species. Today the magma demon was in its growth stage, with a danger rating of D. A fully grown magma demon can reach the peak of C rank, maybe even B rank. Yen Long looked down at his arm, still feeling the swelling and pain, and said, I thought I could handle things on my own, but clearly I still have a long way to go. Captain Sun turned around and asked, if I remember correctly, you've never been on a mission, have you? Yen Long pursed his lips and replied, no, I've only observed from the sidelines before. Captain Sun comforted him, the molten demon is formidable at every stage. For your first time facing an aberrant alone, you did well. I nodded in agreement, placing a hand on Yen Long's shoulder and saying, he could have done better. That molten demon suddenly hurled 2 fireballs straight at where I was hiding. He got distracted, hence the off performance. Yen Long gave me a complicated look, and I inexplicably shivered. I quickly changed the subject. Can you tell me more about these monsters? I'm quite interested. Yen Long said the information was online and suggested I look up educational videos later. Seeing my disappointment, he added, we're about 3 or 4 minutes away, so I'll give you a quick rundown now. Yen Long continued, these monsters are collectively called aberrants. According to records, aberrants first appeared 29 years ago, 1 year after supernaturals emerged on a large scale among humans. Global statistical data shows there are currently 10 types of aberrants, each categorized into 5 developmental stages: larval form, growth stage, mature form, elite, and king class. Today's lava demon was in its growth stage, with a danger rating of D level. A fully matured lava demon typically reaches the peak of C level, or even B level. Captain Sun asked Yen Long, if I remember correctly, your ability was rated at B level during the employment evaluation. As long as you gain more practical experience, monsters of this level shouldn't be difficult for you to handle. Yen Long looked down at his arm and said he thought he was capable of standing on his own, but now realizes he still has a long way to go. Captain Sun comforted him, saying he did well for his first time facing an aberration alone.
I then asked Yen Long about the monsters, and he said these creatures are called aberrations. They first appeared 29 years ago, about 1 year after large numbers of human ability users emerged. There are currently 10 types of aberrant species, divided into 5 major categories. Today's magma demon is in its growth stage, rated D class, but its fully matured form could reach the peak of C class or even B class. Yen Long also admitted he initially thought he could handle it but now realizes he can't. I asked a few more questions, and Yen Long continued explaining. He said he fights wearing mechanized armor because he didn't become a genetic warrior, but that doesn't mean he couldn't become one. There are specific requirements for genetic serum injections, and as an intern, he isn't qualified yet. At that moment, Captain Sun asked Yen Long who I was. After Yen Long explained, Captain Sun and Wei Jun reacted with the same disbelief. I remarked, a dream spanning 30 years, everything familiar has changed. Maybe it would have been better not to wake up. Yen Long glanced at me, sending a chill down my spine. I quickly changed the subject. Seeing my disappointment, Yen Long said he'd look up educational videos when we got back, then decided to give me a brief explanation first. Yen Long said, these creatures are collectively called Xenos. They first appeared 29 years ago, exactly 1 year after superhumans began emerging on a large scale worldwide. Global statistics currently recognize 10 types of Xenos, each categorized into 5 growth stages: larval form, growth stage, mature form, elite, and king species. The molten demon we encountered today was in its growth stage, D class. A fully developed molten demon can reach upper C class or even B class strength. As I listened, another question occurred to me. I asked Yen Long, are there observable differences between the phenomena caused by initial descent, subsequent descent, and final descent stages? For example, the dark veil produced during the first descent might be smaller, while the one from the final descent would be larger. Yen Long shook his head and said, no, the size of the dark veil is related to the strength of the variant, but it can't be used to determine the type of variant or the number of descents. I asked again, then how do you determine whether it's the variant's first descent or not? Yen Long raised a finger and explained, there's one and only method: observing the injuries on the variant's body. Captain Sun, who had been left out for too long and seemed bored, chimed in. According to our Special Operations Bureau's regulations, even if we can't kill a variant during its first descent, we must at least leave wounds on it for identification. The same applies to variants during their second descent. Yen Long added, during their next descent, a variant's size and appearance may change as their power evolves, but the locations of their wounds won't. I scratched my head, thinking this method didn't seem very reliable. If we encountered 2 similarly scarred mutants looking almost identical, how could we possibly distinguish them with just our eyes? Just like how some Asians experience face blindness with certain Caucasians, and some Caucasians experience face blindness with certain Asians, I get face blindness with all African faces. We're all the same species living on the same planet for so long, yet still struggle to recognize each other, let alone those bizarre alien creatures. Yen Long shook his head, dismissing my concerns. That won't happen. During combat, mutant images get uploaded to the network with AI analysis. The error rate won't exceed 0.01%. At this point, he slightly furrowed his brow. I don't think that Molten Demon appeared for the first time today. It acted differently than I expected. I cautiously asked, were there no wounds on its body? Yen Long sighed and said, exactly. That's why the system couldn't determine its appearance count. I was fooled by its initial reactions too and assumed it was its first arrival. As we spoke, the hovercar arrived at its destination and began descending slowly. After getting out, I stretched with a big yawn and looked up at the sky peeking through the steel jungle, sighing, this future world is far more fascinating than I ever imagined. Yen Long also got out of the car, watching my retreating figure. I knew a peculiar emotion had welled up in his heart. For him, this was the present, but for me, this was the future. He could probably never fathom the intricate, subtle emotions swirling in my heart at this moment. Just then, the window of the hovercar's front seat rolled down, and Captain Sun stuck his head out, waving at me and Yen Long. Alright, I'll head back first. After you finish registering, just take a taxi home. I watched as the hovercar slowly ascended, smacking my lips before commenting, Captain Wei Jun and this Captain Sun, they're both technically your superiors, right? They don't put on any seniority airs at all. Surprisingly good-tempered, huh? Yen Long turned around and strode towards the opposite side of the road, saying, because I'm an intern. I didn't grasp the cause-and-effect relationship here. And also the son of the deputy director of the Special Operations Headquarters. Chapter 17, Testing. Across the street stood a deep blue semicircular building. Not particularly tall but occupying a large area, it looked distinctly unique amidst the city's forest of skyscrapers. Yen Long and I walked into the predominantly blue-toned hall. Though slightly younger, Yen Long had a stern face and an air of quiet dignity. I, on the other hand, was like a country boy entering an upscale club,
glancing around with curiosity and bewilderment. Yen Long stood before a white machine and inputted his command expressionlessly with his voice, service reservation, ability registration. Then he gestured for me to stand in front of the machine's camera to have my facial information recorded. A neutral robotic voice emitted from the machine, reservation complete. Please proceed to testing hall number 5 within 10 minutes. An aerial view of the building appeared on the electronic screen, with a red dot marking our current location and blue zigzagging lines leading to a room on the second floor. I asked curiously, don't we need to complete the formalities first? Like personal information, home address, and such? Yen Long walked ahead without turning back. You're already registered. Just a facial scan is enough? Yes. You are only in a coma, not deceased. All your household registration information has been permanently stored on government servers. The facial scan automatically completes your personal data entry. We took the escalator to the second floor and sat on chairs beside a pair of silver-white double doors. After 6 or 7 minutes, the doors slid open soundlessly as a pleasant yet emotionless female voice came from embedded speakers. Mr. Yen Muyun, please prepare for testing. Yen Long tilted his chin up. Go on. I was taken aback. You're not coming with me? I don't know anything about this. Just follow the staff's instructions. The procedure isn't too complicated. Alright then. I nodded and stepped through the doorway. This was an enormous gray-white room with ceilings that appeared to be 10 meters high, vast, and empty except for a metal desk placed against the wall near the entrance. Behind the desk sat a young woman in a blue uniform with rosy cheeks and an adorable appearance. She was staring intently at her computer screen, brows slightly furrowed in concentration. Noticing my entrance, she glanced back at me, her frown deepening as she tentatively asked, Mr. Yen Muyun? I cracked a grin. Yeah, that's me. She seemed skeptical, looked at the screen again, and asked doubtfully, 52 years old this year? Mei-chem, that's right. You've maintained yourself remarkably well. Her smile was somewhat forced. I knew in her mind, she must have thought I'd gotten cosmetic surgery or taken drugs. After all, in this era, plenty of hospitals could achieve such results, but they all cost a fortune. Please, have a seat. She gestured to the chair across the desk. Okay. I sat down and saw an electronic screen standing on the table, displaying her photo and name, Yang Mingming. May I ask when you awakened your ability? June 2022. My voice was somewhat quiet. Yang Mingming looked up at me in confusion. About 2 o'clock this afternoon. To avoid unnecessary trouble, I told a little white lie. After all, I'd spent the previous 30 years in a hospital bed. Even if someone deliberately investigated, it'd be hard to uncover anything. Okay then. Awakening time, June 2nd, 2052, 1400 hours. After recording the data, Yang Mingming lifted her head again, her bright round eyes studying me seriously. May I ask what type of ability you've manifested? Physical, mental, elemental, energy-based, or something else? Recalling that barrier composed of silver-white hexagons, I ventured cautiously, probably, energy-based? Would you say it's an offensive, defensive, or transformative type? Defensive. Okay. Yang Mingming nodded, pressing the blue button on the desk before leaning close to the microphone. Tester 0042, please proceed to testing hall 5. About 2 minutes later, the hall doors opened again, and a woman in a white uniform entered. She appeared quite young, perhaps around 25 years old. She had a tall and slender figure, with short black hair cropped at ear level, chewing gum in a way that made her seem somewhat flippant. She walked behind Yang Mingming, placed a hand on her shoulder, and said, Am I really that convenient? Whenever I'm on duty, you jump at the chance to summon me, you little brat. My lips twitched as I expressionlessly averted my gaze to the floor. Yang Mingming, clearly accustomed to her teasing, remained unfazed and kept her eyes on the screen. Luo Su, this is your job, she replied before pressing a button on the side of the screen. 3 cameras descended from the ceiling, their lenses all focusing inward on the room. This is necessary video documentation, Yang Mingming explained. I nodded. Understood. At this moment, Russell, the tester, straightened up and looked at me with a profound smile. Young man, are you ready? He's 51, Yang Mingming said expressionlessly. The smile on Russell's face visibly stiffened. He even forgot to chew his gum, and after a long pause, he finally muttered, You've got to be kidding me. Yang Mingming directly lifted the tablet and shoved it in front of her face. After personally confirming my age information, Russell scratched the back of his head and forced a dry laugh. Well then, uncle, how on earth do you maintain yourself? Get more sleep. My expression was utterly sincere. Alright, let's get the test started. Yang Mingming tapped the table impatiently. I stood in the center of the spacious room, feeling somewhat uneasy. About 10 meters away, Rossi was facing me. Only then did I notice the deep brown holster strapped to the outer side of her thigh already opened, with a silver-gray pistol spinning effortlessly on her fingertip. Ready? Rossi chewed her gum and raised an eyebrow at me. I swallowed hard and forced a bitter smile before asking, Are those live rounds in there?
She took out the magazine and pried out the first bullet, placing it in her palm. Under the indoor lighting, the bullet's tip glinted with a brass-colored sheen. She grinned and reloaded the bullet into the magazine. "Don't worry, these are all live rounds." "No, I meant, I'm still not very skilled with this ability, and I don't even know if I can successfully use it. What are you doing?" My voice abruptly soared at the last 3 words. Even as she spoke, she had already reassembled the pistol, flicked off the safety, and now its pitch-black barrel was pointed directly at my forehead. Bang! The gun fired. "Wow, that's quite beautiful." Russell let out a small exclamation. My tightly closed eyes slowly opened to see the familiar silver-white barrier standing not far in front of me. It took the form of a circular shape with a 2-meter radius, composed of interlocking silver-white hexagons. The edges were slightly blurred, as if merging into the surrounding air. "Is this how irresponsible you guys operate? What if I hadn't been able to use my ability just now?" I was genuinely angry. Those were real bullets. How could they just fire so recklessly without considering the potential loss of life? "Relax, relax." Russell waved his hand dismissively and pointed ahead of me, saying, "Look." I glanced down to see a vibrant green leaf lying quietly on the floor. "My ability is to transform fired bullets into different objects," she said while aiming the gun at me again. Bang! Another leaf, as if caught in a strong wind, softly tapped against the silver-white barrier. My expression eased slightly, though my brows remained furrowed as I stayed silent. She explained, in the past, some test subjects couldn't activate their abilities during testing no matter what. It wasted a lot of time. Later, we discovered that people's potential is truly unlocked under extreme conditions. Since my ability can both create extreme environments and ensure test subjects remain unharmed, I became the golden tester here. Hearing her sincere explanation, I couldn't maintain my annoyance anymore and sighed resignedly. "Alright, I understand. Does this mean the test is over now? The testing hasn't even started yet." She smiled, raising her gun again. "Remember how you're feeling right now, and keep it up. We'll be using live rounds next, alright?" "No problem." I nodded. The silver barrier could easily block a molten demon's fireballs. A mere handgun hardly concerned me. My only worry had been failing to activate my ability. I'd never doubted its reliability. Bang! 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 She fired several shots in succession. The alloy bullet struck the silver barrier without producing a single spark. Deformed bullet casings clattered to the ground in a metallic chorus. "How does it feel?" she asked, holstering her gun. I shrugged slightly, tilting my head. "Didn't feel a thing." "Okay, I'll gradually increase the test intensity. Let me know if you can't hold on," she said. I scratched my head and tentatively suggested, "How about I give you a rough idea of what I can handle first?" She raised an eyebrow slightly, intrigued. "Go on. My barrier can easily block a D-rank molten demon's fireball." I wasn't exaggerating or showing off. When I blocked 2 fireballs head-on back then, I didn't feel a thing. It was as if the explosions and flames half a meter away were just holographic special effects. She didn't respond upon hearing this, silently backing away until she was about 50 meters from me before stopping. When she raised her gun again, an ominous premonition welled up in my heart. Boom! A violent explosion erupted, flames nearly filling my entire field of vision. That blast was from a fragmentation high-explosive grenade. The silvery barrier before me filtered out the sound waves harmful to the human body. Standing there, with the intense explosion barely half a meter ahead, only a low, muffled drum-like sound reached my ears. As the smoke cleared, she waved from a distance and shouted, "How was it?" Cupping my hands around my mouth, I yelled back, "Not quite enough." "You're done for?" No, the grenade's firepower wasn't enough. The corner of her mouth twitched as she turned her head toward the recording station. Yang Mingming frowned slightly. She already guessed what Ross was about to do. Sure enough, Ross shouted, "Increase the room's testing level to maximum." Yang Mingming sighed as she tapped on the screen. Over a dozen seconds later, the room's lighting dimmed slightly, and an invisible force field descended, designed to absorb explosive energy and prevent excessive damage. At the same time, seams opened in the ceiling and floor, revealing 30-centimeter thick silver-gray alloy walls extending outward, separating the 2 of them on one side and me on the other. At the center of the alloy wall was a half-meter wide square opening. TSK. I winced, hesitating whether I should call for a stop. After all, I wasn't entirely sure if the silver-white barrier could match the durability of those alloy walls opposite me. "I'm going to shoot." Russell's warning echoed in the distance. I swallowed hard and nodded instinctively. The gunshot rang out, unleashing an even more violent explosion before my eyes. Flames surged like towering tidal waves, crashing frantically against the silver barrier in relentless surges. 60 meters away, the square aperture in the alloy wall snapped shut the moment the gun fired. Metal fragments blossomed like a tempest, composing a frenzied symphony of impacts upon its surface. In the camera footage, I stood unmoving like an ancient reef that had weathered millennia of pounding waves. The residual shockwaves of the explosion faded away as I exhaled loudly, rolling my stiff neck and stretching my rigid body. To be honest, I was genuinely terrified just now. I could clearly feel that this explosion was far more powerful than high-explosive grenades or flame spells from D-class molten demons, yet it still didn't seem to reach the limit of the silver-white barrier. At this moment, Yang Mingming's voice came through the ceiling speakers. Testing concluded. Mr. Yan Muyan, please come this way. Still shaken, I let out another long breath and surveyed my surroundings. Large areas of scorch marks covered both the floor and ceiling, with only the wide fan-shaped zone behind me remaining untouched. The silver-gray metal barriers retracted, and Russell stood there twirling her pistol while chewing gum with visible irritation. I ignored her and sat directly at the desk, asking eagerly, "May I ask what my ability rating is?" C+, Yang Mingming replied curtly. My face fell with disappointment. I had originally thought my near-absolute defensive ability would at least merit a B or even an A rating. Russell clicked her tongue, holstered her pistol at her thigh, and plopped down on the desk, looking down at this 52-year-old old man as she said, "Ours is an agency serving the general public. The highest rating we can assess and authorize is C. You've been rated C+, which actually means your ability is above C level. Chapter 19, Silver Guardian. Oh, I raised my head, my previously somewhat gloomy eyes instantly regaining their brightness. Is this guy really 52 years old and not 12? I silently complained in my heart as Russell continued to explain, testing abilities above B level is too costly, and ordinary professions usually don't require superpowers at all, so we don't need to test the limits of every awakened individual. The primary function of the Supernatural Ability Registry is registration, not rating. In other words, we only need to record and categorize the ability information of all awakened individuals. I nodded thoughtfully and then asked, "Then how can I get a higher rating?" "Old man, did you time travel here or something?" Royson teased. In a way, he wasn't wrong. I blinked. If you want to get rated, you need to pursue a career related to supernatural abilities, such as joining the Supernatural Ability Registry or the Special Handling Bureau. After all, only by joining these organizations will your abilities truly have a place to shine. Beyond that, some private security companies also offer employment ratings, but such tests are generally not officially recognized. Russell was far more patient than he appeared, meticulously explaining every detail of those questions that could easily be answered with a quick online search. "Sister Luo, what level are you?" I asked instinctively. Russell froze for a moment, even stopping his chewing gum mid-bite. After a long pause, he regained his senses and waved his hands hurriedly. No. Please don't call me sis, I just turned 27 this year." I pondered for a moment before tentatively saying, "Young lady?" Russell looked utterly speechless. "Forget it. I won't argue with you." She pursed her lips and blew a breath, sending the red hair on her forehead fluttering. "I only got rated C overall. You're just C grade?" I was genuinely surprised, having assumed she'd be at least B grade. "What do you mean by only? C rank is pretty impressive. I'm practically one of the top evaluators at the Ability Registration Bureau." Ross raised his eyebrows, feeling somewhat offended. She jumped off the table, clasping her hands behind her back and sighed with exaggerated maturity. "Back when I registered, I was originally rated C+ level. But after joining the Ability Registration Bureau and undergoing more comprehensive evaluations, my rating was actually downgraded to C rank." "Why was that?" I played along by asking the obvious question. Russell smiled self-deprecatingly and reached to touch the holster on his leg. "Professional evaluation is different from registration. It tries to explore the limits of your ability in every aspect. For example, duration, range, intensity, activation conditions, and so on. What I just fired was a fragmentation grenade. In terms of range and destructive power, it should already be considered B class. But if I unleash 3 attacks like that, I'll become utterly exhausted and could pass out at any moment. So after comprehensive assessment, I'm only rated at C class." As he spoke, Russell sighed again, seeming somewhat envious. A true B class can unleash attacks of this level effortlessly, with almost no significant burden on themselves. I could see she looked quite lonely, and though I wanted to comfort her, I didn't know what to say. "Oh, right. I just remembered something." Russell suddenly returned to his normal demeanor, raising a finger. She turned to face me directly and snapped her fingers. "Every C+ level awakened is someone the Ability Registration Bureau, the Special Cases Bureau, and private security firms are eager to recruit. Uncle, if you're not happy with your current job, you might get a chance to switch to something more exciting in a couple of days." I stroked my chin. "I want to join the Special Affairs Bureau." "You said it so casually, don't actually start considering it," Ross said with a mix of amusement and exasperation. "And why do you want to join the Special Affairs Bureau?" "Let me be clear, I have great respect for the agents there. But they have to fight anomalies every single day, it's way too dangerous. Come to our Ability Registration Office instead, no danger, high pay. Isn't that better?" I gave her a rather profound look, as they say, with great power comes great responsibility. "Put." Russell covered his mouth with the back of his hand but still let out a chuckle. "Didn't take you for such a socially responsible uncle. I think I might be a little moved."
I hunched my shoulders. There's an age gap between us. I'm still a fresh bachelor barely past 20, while you'll be hitting 30 in a few years. Russell naturally interpreted it differently. You might look young, but you're easily old enough to be my dad. While they were talking, all the test information had been recorded, leaving just one blank spot remaining on the screen's form. Yang Mingming raised her head, looked straight into my eyes, and asked, "May I ask, what name have you chosen for your special ability?" The door of the testing hall opened, I stepped out, and patted Yin Long's shoulder as he sat in the chair. "Shall we go?" "Move out." The two of them left the ability registration office and arrived at the roadside outside. "By the way, I've always been curious, how did you make phone calls before, and how did you notify people to evacuate that entire neighborhood?" I crossed my arms, my face showing genuine curiosity. Yin Long raised his left hand to show me. Beneath the skin on the back of his hand, there was an almost imperceptible triangular protrusion. This is an implantable chip, combined with a concealed earpiece and smart eye, which basically covers all the functions of a smartphone from the old era. Only then did I notice a tiny flesh-colored earpiece nestled in their right ear, almost invisible unless you looked carefully. "Whoa," I exclaimed with slight surprise, then asked, "What's the smart iris?" Yen Long tilted his head slightly in thought. "They look similar to colored contacts, but completely transparent, functioning as a display screen." I leaned in a little closer, scrutinizing from the side. A thin, transparent crystalline film covered the surface of his eyes. "Damn impressive," I sighed sincerely. "I'll call a ride first." Yen Long brushed his left hand lightly and said softly, 12, book me a car to Ninghai residential area. How much would a set of equipment like this cost? It must be really expensive, I asked with keen interest. It is pretty expensive, around 100,000. It's the latest model of smart devices on the market, a coming-of-age gift from my dad, Yen Long said flatly. I blinked. From the look on your face, seems like you're still not satisfied? Yen Long didn't respond, his gaze calmly fixed on the stream of vehicles coming and going along the road. Sensing the awkward atmosphere, I tactfully changed the subject. How about you guess my awakened ability evaluation grade? C+ probably. Spot on. I chuckled dryly, continuing to make small talk. Then guess what my ability's name is? How could anyone guess that? Hint, try guessing from the perspective of color and external appearance. After a brief silence, Yen Long said, a white wall? Just like your dad. You don't have a single artistic bone in your body, I lamented, looking upwards. So what's it called? Silver Guardian. Not bad. A black sedan pulled up in front of the two, its doors automatically opening. As I bent to enter the car, I heard a faint sigh behind me. Why do parents always think money can make up for companionship? Chapter 20 Boundary Guest. Everything I've told you about my father, especially my opinions and judgments about him, remember, none of it can be mentioned to anyone. Yen Long looked at me with utmost seriousness. The two stood beside a white stone-carved fountain at that moment, facing a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. Xiaolong, some matters require more communication, particularly regarding the relationship between children and parents. Many problems arise precisely because each side fails to understand the other yet refuses to sit down for proper discussion and explanation, causing the rift to widen endlessly. Listen to your uncle, I majored in education in college. Say one more word, and tonight I'll make your blanket 200 times heavier. I shivered and obediently shut my mouth. The two entered the building, walking one after the other straight into the elevator. Inside, Yen Long pressed the button for the 112th floor on the digital screen. TSK, so tall. I reached out to fiddle with the screen, scrolling the page to the very top. The tallest building here reached a staggering 150 floors. The elevator climbed swiftly, revealing a maze of intertwined overpasses beyond the windows, like an intricate spider web weaving through the gaps of this towering steel jungle, connecting skyscrapers and mid-air plazas suspended in the sky. With a soft ding, the elevator arrived at the 112th floor, its doors sliding open slowly. There appeared to be 3 residences on this level. Following Yen Long out of the elevator, I watched as he headed toward a heavy dark brown wooden door on the right side of the hallway. Tomorrow I'll take you to the property management to register your biometrics, otherwise, you won't even be able to use the elevator, Yen Long said while gripping the door handle. Half a second later, a quiet clicking sound came from inside as the lock disengaged. Yen Long pushed the door open. As soon as he stepped into the room, the lights gradually brightened, shifting from a dim yellow to full illumination, allowing the eyes to adjust. I couldn't help but exclaim, wow, it's huge. The foyer was spacious and square, with a living room conservatively estimated at about 100 square meters. The light brown hardwood flooring extended to a massive floor-to-ceiling window at the far end, offering a view of the city bathed in twilight. On the left wall was a huge built-in black display screen, occupying 2/3 of the entire surface. The right side mainly featured sofas and seating, with heavy curtains partially drawn behind them, barely revealing another floor-to-ceiling window. Having changed into slippers, Yen Long casually tossed a pair to the floor beside him and asked, "What would you like to eat?" At this moment, I suddenly felt something was amiss. Recalling everything Yen Long had said since I woke up, I realized he'd never mentioned someone who should have existed, someone extremely important and indispensable. I turned to look at my grown-up nephew beside me, carefully choosing my words before slowly asking, "So, may I ask, is my sister-in-law not at home?" Yan Long's body stiffened slightly, but his hands continued moving as he placed the removed shoes into the shoe cabinet on the left side of the entrance hallway. Straightening up, he said, "I don't have a mother." I froze momentarily, wondering in my heart if she had passed away, but if she had died, Yan Long wouldn't have said he didn't have a mother. Perhaps this woman had done something to harm the family, which is why he refused to acknowledge his mother's existence. Seeing the complex expression on my face, Yan Long frowned and said, "Don't misunderstand, I meant it quite literally. Explain this to me, what exactly is going on?" I changed into slippers and followed him. Yan Long paused, his head slightly lowered as he stopped in place. I quickly backtracked, "Of course, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Sit down first." Yan Long pointed at the nearby sofa, then walked straight into the kitchen and took 2 bottles of juice from the fridge. Behind his back, I grinned sheepishly and obediently sat down like a schoolboy who'd done something wrong. Yan Long tossed me a juice bottle and seated himself on the diagonal sofa. He said, "Back then, around 2030 or so, probably due to gender conflicts, survival pressures on young people, and other issues, both birth rates and marriage rates kept declining almost every year. Later, the policy of artificial cultivation was introduced. Regardless of gender, as long as you provided sperm or ovum, you could have them paired for breeding in the hospital's gene bank. I don't know the specifics, but honestly, it's not a big deal. Things like that weren't uncommon in my dad's time either." I opened my mouth but ultimately said nothing. Yan Long tilted his head back for a sip of juice and asked again, "What's for dinner?" "Whatever, I'm not picky, I'll eat anything." I waved my hand dismissively. Yan Long stood up and glanced at me sidelong. "You've been asleep for 30 years. This is your first meal since waking up. Then we'd better make it meaningful." I rubbed my chin thoughtfully. "Do you know how to make braised pork and yellow simmered chicken?" These were the 2 dishes I used to order most often at Chinese restaurants when I studied abroad, always the best remedy for my homesickness and cravings. "The house is out of pork." Yan Long thought for a moment, then turned and walked into the kitchen. After about 10 seconds, he popped his head back out and said, "No chicken either." I was utterly speechless. "Wait in the living room for a bit. The pork and chicken should arrive in about 10 minutes, Yan Long said as he walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on his pants before heading into the inner bedroom. When he reappeared, he was holding a semi-transparent black rectangular object. "A phone, you know how to use one, right?" he asked. I gave him an earnest look. "I've been asleep for 30 years, not 300. It's a product from Huawei 2 years ago. This was my old one, it's been reset to factory settings. Use it for now," Yan Long said, tossing the phone over to me. I reached out and caught it, surprised by how unexpectedly light it was, so much so that I briefly wondered if he'd thrown a plastic model to mess with me. But I quickly dismissed the thought. My little brother might pull such a childish prank, but this cold-faced, tight-lipped nephew of mine definitely wouldn't. The power button is on top. After saying this, Yan Long walked into the kitchen. I examined the phone closely. Its seamless design made it look like a single, flawless piece, resembling a work of art. Smiling wryly at myself, I pressed the power button. The screen flickered with a light, but contrary to expectations, the 8-petal flower animation boot screen didn't appear. Has Huawei's logo changed so much over all these years? On the phone screen appeared the face of a man wearing a white hood, revealing half of his pitch-black, featureless face. Below the avatar, 2 characters were written in classical ink-style Kai font, border guest. Below that were 2 blank fields to fill in, username and special ability. Before I could react, the words Silver Guardian in bold black font slowly appeared in the ability field. What kind of thing is this, a dating app? I frowned slightly. I wanted to ask aloud, but hearing the clatter of pots and pans coming from the kitchen, I decided not to bother them with such trivial matters. After some thought, I concluded this must be some kind of government-developed software, otherwise how could it possibly know the ability name I just registered? After all, apart from the ability registration office, only Yan Long knew the term Silver Guardian. This is a bit weird. How did they know I was the one using this phone? Does this phone have some kind of biometric input too? I grinned suddenly, realizing that high-tech life doesn't just bring convenience. If they already know the name of my ability, they must know my real name too, which means this username field is for entering a nickname. I opened the phone's virtual keyboard and typed Shepard into the username field. A blue system prompt box with gold trim popped up on my phone screen. Shepard login successful. The web page background was pure black, devoid of images or patterns, with only 2 horizontally aligned leaderboards at the top, the realm list and the battle list. I clicked into the left side realm list. The new page displayed 20 IDs, with Shepard positioned right in the middle, followed by the ability name, Silver Aegis, and a string of numbers, 977863. I glanced at the ID above mine, a string of Cyrillic letters, with the ability name translated into Chinese, Steel Arms, and the final number being 977862. Rankings? Superpower rankings? That's when I noticed a small red question mark in the top right corner of the page. Squinting, I reached out and tapped it. The blue and gold-edged system prompt box popped up again, displaying, the world rankings have collected and sorted a total of 401,234,983 superhumans worldwide. At that moment, I realized two things. First, this so-called boundary guest software probably wasn't developed by official authorities, but by some larger and more mysterious organization, because the awakened included in its ranking weren't just from China, but from across the entire world. Second, I recalled something Yen Long had once mentioned offhand. Since that inexplicable plague 30 years ago, nearly over 10% of humanity worldwide has acquired various superpowers. 400 million superhumans, 10%, that means there are roughly only 4 billion people left in the world now. Before I fell into a coma, the global population was 7.5 billion. With the advancement of society and technology, why has the total human population nearly halved? And what about the so-called deity that Yen Long mentioned earlier, he, she, or it? What role has it played in these years? I often wonder, does a god really exist? As a staunch materialist warrior, I remain skeptical. Before I could think further, a male electronic voice suddenly rang out in the room. Hive delivery, swift and efficient. Your package has arrived. Please receive it. Get the takeout. Yen Long's voice called from the kitchen. Oh, okay. I instinctively got up to open the door, but when I did, there was no one outside. Swarm delivery, fast and efficient. Your package has arrived, please collect. The electronic voice chimed again. Yen Long, wrapped in a gray apron, stepped out of the kitchen holding a kitchen knife and pointed toward the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the living room, not at the door, over by the window. I turned my head to look and saw a small drone steadily hovering outside the floor-to-ceiling window, with a blue plastic crate suspended beneath it. Cloud, open the window, Yen Long said calmly. The floor-to-ceiling window slid open to both sides, revealing a half-meter gap. The drone flew in, placed a blue plastic box on the coffee table in front of the sofa, then promptly retraced its path and disappeared into the cityscape bathed in twilight. I watched the whole scene with keen interest, marveling at every detail of life in this era. Could you bring that box in, please? Thanks. Yen Long tilted his chin toward the coffee table. I picked up the box and said, speaking of which, opening the floor-to-ceiling window directly seems a bit dangerous. What if some child accidentally falls out? The smart central control system won't open the windows if any living being is moving within 3 meters of them. Yen Long finished speaking and turned to walk into the kitchen. Smart central control system? Was that the electronic voice earlier? I stood at the kitchen entrance, surveying the layout. Aside from a few unfamiliar machines, it wasn't much different from before. Don't you think that voice sounded somewhat familiar? Yen Long set down the kitchen knife and pointed to the space beside the cutting board on the counter. Just put it here. I placed the blue plastic box down and turned to look at him. Now that you mention it, it does sound familiar, like I've heard it somewhere before. Yen Long opened the box, took out the chicken and pork, and said calmly, that was your voice. I had been curiously fiddling with the fridge, but froze at his words. The name of our home smart control system is Yun, as in the cloud. Yen Long looked at me, his voice solemn. My dad chose it deliberately, Grandma and Grandpa loved it. I half-turned my body, took a deep breath, and exhaled forcefully. When I looked back, my eyes were slightly reddened, but my expression remained unchanged. Yen Long didn't look at me again, silently tearing open the packaging and washing the meat in the sink. Do you know about interface guests? I suddenly asked, the transition coming across rather abrupt. Interface guests? Yen Long turned to look at me, his brows tightly furrowed. How would you know about interface guests? Turn the water off first, don't waste it. Yen Long turned off the tap and wiped his hands on his apron. What happened exactly? It was already like this when I powered it on. I handed my phone over. Yen Long browsed through the page, muttering to himself, how could it be this fast? Normally, regular people receive Jieka's notification only 2 or 3 days after awakening their abilities. I've been awake for 30 years. I raised a hand to remind him. Yen Long fell silent for a moment. World Guests can be understood as a hacker organization with information tentacles stretching across the globe. Yen Long handed me his phone and explained. This suddenly emerging organization from 30 years ago made its debut by displaying intelligence-gathering capabilities beyond ordinary comprehension, like a phantom hovering over human society. Whether ordinary people or secret agents, once they become awakeners, they're all recorded and publicly listed on an app developed by them. No confidentiality measures work against World Guests. After the initial panic and unease, people found that the boundary guests seemed only interested in ranking the awakened. Just rankings? I blinked, suddenly finding the boundary guests somewhat endearing. Yen Long continued, the boundary guests maintain 2 lists, the boundary list and the battle list. The former ranks abilities, while the latter ranks the number of aberrants killed by awakened individuals. What's your rank on the boundary list? I asked with keen interest. Yen Long pondered for a moment, about 1.7 million, give or take. Hee, I'm at 970,000, higher than you. 970,000?
Yan Long picked up the kitchen knife again to slice the pork. Starting within the top million already, seems like Jeeker thinks highly of you. What was your starting score? Over 20 million at first, then it gradually increased.
An increase this big? I was taken aback.
Border Walker rankings are primarily based on current manifestations of abilities. The more frequently a person uses their abilities, the more comprehensive the information Border Walkers obtain, leading to more accurate rankings. So for the first month after an awakened appears on the upper realm rankings, their position can fluctuate drastically if they frequently use their abilities. Yan Long placed the chopped pork pieces into a bowl and washed his hands. If they rarely use them, their ranking stays mostly stable, with fluctuations limited to a few thousand places at most. But as soon as an ability is used, the boundary observer will definitely know its effects and adjust the rankings. That's a bit creepy. I grimaced, feeling as though invisible eyes were constantly watching my life. To be honest, abilities come in all sorts of bizarre forms, and no one knows what criteria the boundary observer uses for ranking. Some high-ranked abilities have little practical significance in combat. It wouldn't be strange for an awakened ranked 100,000 to be killed by one ranked 100 million. Yan Long cleaved the chicken in two with a single stroke. So, checking the boundary rankings is just for fun. If you really want to compare who's stronger, you should look at the battle rankings? I stroked my chin and said. Yan Long paused his movements and glanced sideways at me. There's this saying online, pretty similar to what you just said. 30 years have passed, and internet slang still sounds the same. I chuckled. Yan Long continued. No one knows the criteria for the boundary rankings, but the battle rankings are straightforward. Only two rules, the quantity and quality of aberrants killed. I tapped open the combat ranking page on my phone, first seeing a system prompt box with blue background and gold edges. You currently have no ranking on this leaderboard. Closing the prompt revealed the top 20 list. Ranked first, Hidden Dragon, ability, do not use. S-class kills, 5, A-class kills, 319, B-class kills, 1532, C-class. This ability name sounds all mystical, can't make heads or tails of it. Reading the data, I clicked my tongue in amazement. Are these SABC ranks the same monster classifications we encountered during the day? All are variants, Yan Long replied without turning his head. That guy is seriously badass, guess he spends his whole life doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and killing mutants. I turned off the battle rankings and opened the boundary rankings, curious to see if the top names overlapped between the two lists. But when I reached the first page, the ranking at the top displayed a number 10,001, and beyond that, there was nothing higher. I casually asked, the top 10,000 don't even get to be viewed? Yan Long was marinating the sliced chicken before putting it in the fridge. He replied, it's not that they can't be viewed. The first 10,000 simply aren't ranked. No ranking? Yes, this comes straight from an awakened individual ranking within the top 10,000. When one supernatural ability breaks into the top 10,000 on the boundary rankings, they're called one of the 10,000 arts. The rankings aren't ordered beyond that point. Somehow, my mind suddenly flashed back to the scene I witnessed just before losing consciousness 30 years ago. Zhang Yu's body was being tossed up and down like a rag doll, and then the door opened, revealing my pale-faced younger brother walking in from outside. I asked Yan Long, is your father one of the 10,000 arts? No, search for Newton. Newton? The button Nyo. I typed these two words in and soon obtained the information I wanted. Nyo done, ability, gravity field, ranked 34,872, already placing him at the pinnacle of the pyramid among over 400 million awakened individuals worldwide. Yan Long remarked impassively, he said he considered himself a bit of a counterfeit Newton, so he chose that username. I smiled knowingly, sounds just like that kid's style. As I said this, something suddenly felt strange to me. Perhaps it was the sudden realization that the kid I was referring to was now 48 years old, nearly the same age my parents had been before I fell into my coma. Just then, the sound of a door closing came from the living room beyond the kitchen, as if someone had come home. I slipped my phone into my pocket and turned to go out. Standing in the entryway was a middle-aged man in a sharply tailored black suit, changing into slippers. Sensing something, he looked up and froze instantly when he saw me. After several seconds of silence, he rubbed the corner of his eye and called out softly, "Brother?" His voice was feather-light, as if afraid to shatter some illusory dream. Chapter 23 Night. The man standing by the entrance was tall and well-proportioned, with sharply defined facial features and not a trace of middle-aged puffiness. Though there were faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, I recognized him beyond any doubt, my younger brother, Yan Yiming. I had planned to give him a big hug when we met, but faced with that familiar yet strange face, my feet seemed rooted to the floor. 30 years had passed in the blink of an eye. The once idealistic 18-year-old boy now stood before me as a man who'd reached the age of understanding heaven's will. He let out a hearty laugh. I was afraid Xiaolong might be playing a prank on me. I waved my hand dismissively, pulling a face. Only you'd entertain such silly suspicions. Your son's far more dependable than you ever were at his age. He grinned, like father, like son.
You've been corrupting me since I was a kid. In that dazed moment, he suddenly looked just like the boy from all those years ago. The 30-year chasm between them seemed to vanish in an instant, as if nothing had ever changed. Yan Yiming slipped on his indoor shoes and suddenly raised his voice. Xiaolong, any alcohol in the house? From the kitchen came Yan Long's muffled reply, you don't drink. Right, I hardly ever drink, so of course there isn't any. Yan Yiming chuckled and shook his head before adding, no problem though, we can get delivery in 10 minutes. The dinner was lavish, featuring 2 large pots of braised pork and braised chicken at the center of the table, surrounded by fresh vegetables like sautéed lettuce with oyster sauce and chilled wood ear mushrooms. I placed a tender piece of braised pork in my mouth, chewed twice, and mumbled with my mouth full, your son is truly much more skilled than you ever were. When you were 16, you'd ask whether to put the seasoning packets or the noodles in first when making instant ramen. Yiming's face flushed slightly with embarrassment, and he cleared his throat twice. Everyone has to start somewhere. I turned to Yan Long, who was quietly eating beside me, and asked, so when was the first time you cooked? About 12 years old. You started cooking for yourself so young. I thought for a moment, my expression turning serious as I turned to Yan Yiming. So why haven't you found yourself a wife? Yan Yiming took a sip of liquor, the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepening. I had a few relationships before, but various reasons always kept them from lasting. Later I just found the whole thing too troublesome and stopped looking. If it weren't for my parents, never mind. He left the rest unsaid, but both Yan Long and I understood what he meant. If it weren't for his parents pressuring him to get married, he wouldn't have even gone to the fertility center to adopt a child just to shut them up. I frowned slightly and glanced subtly at Yan Long, who was eating calmly as if completely unfazed by these words. After all, brothers reuniting after 30 years apart. I'd already downed 2 beers before the meal, and now, feeling a bit tipsy, I blurted out things without fully considering the consequences. Seemingly sensing my concern, Yan Long didn't look up and said quietly, it's fine. I figured this stuff out 10 years ago. No matter what the initial motives were, Dad has treated me well since then. That's enough for me. Yan Yiming downed his glass in one gulp, a bitter smile appearing on his face. You think I don't know what's going through your mind? All these years, you've never truly forgiven me. Yan Long seemed not to hear him, silently picking up food and bringing it to his mouth. The originally somewhat harmonious atmosphere at the dining table had now turned stiff. I ultimately couldn't avoid the question that weighed most heavily on my mind. Mom and Dad, when did they pass? Yan Yiming pursed his lips, downed the beer in his glass in one gulp, but didn't answer my question. Yan Long lifted his head, his pitch-black eyes betraying little emotion. Grandpa passed away over a year ago. Grandma, 3 months ago. 3 months? I suddenly chuckled, then lightly shook my head and repeated, 3 months. Yan Yiming seemed somewhat annoyed and unbuttoned 2 buttons on his shirt. Tomorrow, I'll take you to see them. After finishing the meal, Yan Yiming stood up and waved his hand. I'll do the dishes. Xiaolong, take your uncle to your grandparents' room. Yan Long nodded and turned to look at me, whose face was already flushed. Come with me. 7 empty liquor bottles were piled on the table. Yan Yiming had only drunk 2 of them, while Yan Long hadn't touched any. I steadied myself against the chair back as I stood up. Where's the bathroom? They have it in their grandparents' room, Yan Long said flatly. We crossed the living room and entered the bedroom at the end of the west hallway. Yan Long pointed to the white wooden door in the corner. The bathroom is over there, he said. I staggered toward it, closed the door behind me, and emerged 3 or 4 minutes later. My face was streaked with tears, my eyelids still slightly reddened. Yan Long handed me a slim, dark blue tablet. This control panel can operate all the functions in the room, like the air conditioning, lights, and so on. But we're more accustomed to direct voice control. You just need to say Cloud before issuing a command. For example, Cloud, lower the room brightness. As soon as he finished speaking, the originally fairly bright lights in the room dimmed slightly. The room can also switch to white noise mode, which helps with sleep. Let me demonstrate one for you, Cloud, Seaside. The surrounding lights dimmed once again, a few light sources swaying like candle flames, while the sound of waves crashing against the shore echoed outside the window, immersing you in the scene. If you want to learn more about its features, you can visit the brand's official website. There's a manual there. Ha 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 ha. I suddenly burst out laughing. Yan Long looked slightly puzzled, tilting his head to one side. You sound like a real estate agent. I wiped away my tears. Sensing that I was tipsy, Yan Long didn't mind my comment. Do you still need me to continue introducing it? No, I'm so sleepy now. I just want to go to bed as quickly as possible. I waved my hand and exaggeratedly yawned. Then rest well. Yan Long turned to leave, closing the door behind him. After the door closed, my drunken facade disappeared. I leaned against the wall, expression blank. Neither my parents nor my younger brother knew that on the night I broke up with my first love years ago, I drank a 250 milliliters bottle of vodka and woke up the next morning completely unaffected. 5 bottles of beer could at most make me slightly tipsy. There was no way that actually make me lose control. Slowly, I surveyed the room and noticed a photo frame on the table. Moving closer, I saw two silver-haired elderly people leaning against each other, with a tall, upright middle-aged man and an indifferent-looking boy of about 13 or 14 standing behind them. I stared at it quietly for a long time before finally turning the frame face down on the table. The family photo was missing one person, unqualified. I walked to the window and sat on the sill leaning against the wall. The city's nightscape was dazzling and enchanting, yet as I gazed at the riot of neon lights outside, the depths of my eyes reflected a prismatic darkness. Chapter 24, The Cemetery. The next morning, as the hovercar sped along the highway, I settled into a comfortable position against the seatback and asked Yan Yiming, who sat opposite me in his crisp suit with resolute features, "So you awakened before I returned to the country?" No one would ever guess that we're brothers, let alone that I'm the older sibling despite looking barely over 20. Yan Yiming nodded and began recounting how he first encountered supernatural events 30 years ago, back in March 2022. That night, someone in their class group chat had shared a foreign link, claiming the world was about to change. He downloaded a VPN to access it, a website with no video categories and just over 200 clips in total. Looking back now, he realized that site was likely the precursor to today's boundary browsers. After opening this gateway to a new world, he became utterly absorbed, spending all his free time watching supernatural videos and browsing related forums. One day he developed a fever while hanging out with friends. Sensing something was off when they parted ways, he checked into a nearby hotel, only telling his parents he'd be staying at a friend's place. 3 days prior, there'd been reports of a Spaniard who awakened and burned his family and neighbors to death. Such posts weren't uncommon on superpower forums. He wasn't sure if this was just a normal fever or the onset of becoming a metahuman, though subconsciously he leaned toward the latter. After all, he hadn't experienced any drastic temperature changes before falling ill, and as it turned out, his hunch was correct. I leaned forward slightly with keen interest. "Last night we were so caught up in your backstory that I never got to witness your ability firsthand. Can you manipulate gravity?" Yan Yiming told me to hold on tight. I quickly grasped the car door handle, and in the next instant, my butt lifted off the seat as my body began floating imperceptibly. I marveled at how amazing it was. He said besides eliminating gravity, he could also increase it. Pressing his right hand downward, I fell back, the leather seat sinking under the pressure. My arm felt like it was pressing against a bag of cement, my fingers utterly immobile. I yelled to let me go, but he pretended not to hear properly, a mischievous smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Yan Long watched from the side, pursing his lips. In his memory, his father was always serious, but around me, he became relaxed and childish. The hovercar slowed down as we reached our destination. The day was bright with sunlight, the breeze crisp and refreshing. Beyond the large iron gates stretched endless emerald green lawns dotted with dense rows of gray-white tombstones. Some people inside held bouquets of flowers, while others crouched solemnly before the graves. I stepped out of the vehicle, took a deep breath, and said, "Let's go." We walked deep into the cemetery, no one speaking along the way. Yan Yiming stopped before two identical black tombstones, crouched down with a smile and said, "Dad, Mom, I've brought brother to see you." Yan Long removed the withered bouquet in front of the gravestones and replaced it with the fresh flowers in his hands. I stared expressionlessly at the stones bearing our parents' names. Yan Yiming patted Yan Long's shoulder, and the two walked to a corner. Yan Long looked back and saw me kneeling before the tombstone, forehead pressed to the ground, remaining motionless for a long time. The father and son paused beneath a tree. Yan Yiming asked Yan Long if he was unaccustomed to having me, this suddenly appearing uncle, in their household. Yan Long replied that after junior high, he'd visited me weekly at the sanatorium, so I wasn't exactly a stranger. Yan Yiming sighed, remarking how hard these years must have been for him. Before the two fell into silence, Yan Yiming realized he didn't truly understand his son. Yan Long had been sensible, obedient, and academically outstanding since childhood, with clear goals and no rebellious phase. When his parents passed away, he hadn't shed a single tear. Half an hour later, the two returned to find the formerly dust-covered gravestone now polished enough to reflect their faces. I smiled and said, "Let's go," my eyes faintly red. Yan Yiming checked his watch and nodded, saying he'd drop us home first before heading to work. He then asked Yan Long whether he had an internship that day, to which Yan Long replied he'd taken leave the day before. Yan Yiming sighed, saying he couldn't take leave whenever he wanted, and promised to try getting off work early today so the three of us could go out for a nice meal. The hovercar stopped at the residential compound's entrance. Yan Long and I got out and headed home. After changing into slippers, I lay on the sofa with vacant eyes, lost in thought. Without expression, Yan Long told me to follow him. When I asked confusedly what we were doing, he replied, "Taking you to see your grandparents."